Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is not only a great person and a great friend, but is also a published psychologist, a stand up comic, and one of three hosts of his very own podcast. Join me in welcoming Mr. Devon Struthers. Devon, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super stoked on this. I really appreciate you joining the podcast
Yeah, no
today.
problem, man. I'm pumped to be here.
Cool, cool. Um, So, for anybody that's listening to this, this is the first episode of the Common Collective podcast. I am your host, Anthony Chisholm. Today's guest, as you know, is Devon Struthers. We have a very interesting topic that we're going to go over today and discuss. And before we get into that, Devin, how are you doing with all this social distancing going on? Like you're in LA, so you're kind of like in the heart of where it's kind of like popping off in California. So
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about this a little bit before the recording too. A lot of people are talking about how like, oh, we're going so stir crazy, and I'm going crazy in my house. I need to get out. I need to do stuff. I'm pretty okay. This is pretty similar to my life beforehand. I was a little bit of a homebody before we actually had to stay at home. So it's not like a lot of what I'm doing is really different. It just feels like I'm doing what I want to do without like the pressure of like, well, it's a good day, probably should go for a hike, or like, I haven't been in public in a week, maybe I should go see people. Like it's without like those kind of constraints. So it's pretty
right.
nice. It's actually like, yeah, it's a little scary. There are some scary parts to it, but for the most part, man, just hanging in there. How about you?
You know what? Like you had said, we kind of talked a little bit about this before we jumped online here because we are social distancing. Everybody, Devon's not here. We're doing this remotely, which thank goodness for technology. I like this is pretty amazing that the setup that we have right here is working how it's working.
Oh yeah.
I'm doing well. I've worked from home for like the last almost 6 years or so, so not reporting to an office, and just kind of like waking up, getting out of bed, throwing some casual comfy clothes on, and then just strolling into the home office. Like this is nothing new. And I'm kind of a homebody too. And so like I like, especially like on the weekends, like I like sitting down and doing nothing and like letting my brain kind of like get a recharge. The interesting thing is that's kind of I think changed the dynamic is I'm now a homeschool teacher,
Oh
which I
wow.
didn't necessarily willingly sign up for. So this just kind of, they closed my daughter's school, and so it the challenge has been working full time and homeschooling at the same time, and because we like to, I'm trying to get everything done by the time my wife gets home,
That dude, that
and so
fascinates
that
me.
way we can have like family time in the evening. We can, watch a movie, we can eat dinner together and all this kind of stuff. Um, and so she usually gets off at like 5 and, um, it's kind of difficult because we usually start bedtime at like 7 and, doing the shower thing. And so that the night like comes really quick and is over with before, we really know it.
Wow. Well, hold on. So
Um, but,
you're teaching her now, right?
like we're being able to sit there with my daughter and um you know just have her around more is so cool, like because she's gone like 6 hours a day, and so really the solid time is spent on the weekends. So the fact that I get to like kind of teach her and interact with her and see really how her brain works has been super cool. But it's like juggling the the responsibility of being productive and making sure that my work gets done and stuff like that. That really has been the biggest stressor. But other than that, like it's been pretty sweet.
Well, well, hold
How's
on. I
Romana
want to.
taking it?
I mean, she's doing fine. She's adapted to it a lot better than I have. Honestly, she really like she is a homebody and she does like kind of like just chilling at home. So she likes that a lot. But I'm actually pretty curious about you homeschooling. So you said that you homeschool your daughter. Like, isn't that a lot of pressure? Like, I feel like if I were to homeschool somebody, I would 100% accidentally teach them wrong. And then they just have this nugget of information that's just forever wrong that they're like, yeah, but I learned it in fifth grade at my house. And then that's just
Yeah.
that, like, is that does that put pressure on you for that?
No, because I tend to think I know everything, and whatever I say is right.
Well, as long as we're being
No, no, no.
honest.
Yeah, yeah. No, like honestly, the way that again with technology, they've made it pretty easy, and especially in the like the short amount of time that they had to flip into this mode was really quite astonishing, honestly, because they like there's several different programs um, or websites or whatever that they use. And the first week was the most difficult because I think the teacher was trying to get used to posting assignments in two different places. Plus, we had like, hard copies of paperwork and stuff like that. And it was just that was a lot to get used to because she wasn't saying exactly what the assignments were based on what was listed on these websites, and so it was the first 2 days I think were really super hectic, and I
Yeah.
was like, dude, I cannot do this, and I remember when this all kind of like came crashing down, my wife was just like, she was starting to stress because she's this is what I love about her. She's willing to jump in and take responsibility that she doesn't need to, and she doesn't ask for help. Like she just like slams into something, and she'll just take it head on. And so she has a really hard time, like kind of dialing that back and not overburdening herself,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So I was like, look, she was starting to freak out, and I was like, look, I got you. Like, we're a team, right? You remember that. That's what we said to each other.
Aw.
So I got you. Like, I'm home. Like, this makes total sense. Like, I got this, right?
Yeah.
Um, so really, back to what you were saying about like what she's actually being taught, like it's all just like assignments on the computer. So she'll log into her little websites, and I mean, Annabelle's like wicked smart, and she's like zipping around on the computer, and I'm like looking and watching her. I'm like, dude, that's so cool how you already know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
um but it's all stuff that she's already familiar with, and we kind of already have like the teachers already set up this system. Like when, as far as like homework, it's like, okay, you have a list of 10 words that you need to learn how to spell.
Yeah.
You have X, Y, and Z to do. Here's your math, subtraction, addition, whatever. And so yeah, she's only in first grade, so I mean, thankfully, like I'm not like dropping real history facts on her about, you know, George Washington or Teddy Roosevelt or anything else in between. You know what I'm saying? So it's, I don't have to do too much lesson planning. It's just I'm making sure she gets it done, and if she gets stuck, I'm kind of giving her like different ways to like think through the problem and like encouragement. So that is nowhere near what a teacher does, like an actual teacher. Like I had respect for teachers before, and single parents, whether they be moms or
Mhm.
dads. But like that has grown so much through this experience, and like teachers definitely do not get paid near what they're worth and what kind of value they give to our kids. But
Well, definitely. I mean,
yeah,
even
so it's been
from
it's been
it sounds like even
interesting.
from like quarantine like this, they're still making lesson plans, they're still doing their job. Like even though you're the one giving encouragement and stuff, they're still providing all of the foundation for you guys to succeed.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I would be absolutely lost because I remember Maggie was homeschooled when she was younger for like a year or two, and so was her one of her brothers, and you know her mom had like this this house cleaning job and stuff like that, and so Maggie would be doing her homework, her homeschool work, while her mom would be going and cleaning houses and
Wow.
whatever, and her mom would be working out of a book, and that was like legit homeschooling, right? And so this is nowhere near that, and it's still, I mean, to me it's difficult. It might be a breeze for somebody else, but like I said, I think just splitting up my time between a full time job and, kind of like, I mean, it's more like tutoring than anything
Mhm.
else. Um, that's kind of, I guess um, where the biggest difference is. But yeah, dude, teacher, like they even had just recently, I think it was the end of, she just got spring break last week. And so not this Friday, but last Friday, like the whole entire first grade class got on Zoom, and they had like a little Zoom session,
Oh,
and they were just like chit chatting, and like they got to see each other. So I think that was really good for them. They all seemed to like it, and yeah, it was pretty funny. Annabelle was like, "You know what? Like the only thing I didn't like about it, Dad, was that like all the other kids were like really talking over each other and interrupting, and so like I just sat there and was just like waiting for it to be my turn, but it never happened, and I just started laughing because she's the queen of interruptions. Like anytime like there's a moment of silence, and I'm like." Hey, babe, I was thinking that we could all go, do something. And like before I can even finish the sentence that I'm addressing my wife with, like Annabelle's like, "Oh, hey mom, can hey, look at this," like Stuart, like, "Look what I can do," and I'm just like, dude, just like one sentence is all I need to get out. Like, can you just wait?
she
So
needs to
yeah, I
hop
thought it was
in.
pretty
Oh,
funny.
that's so cute. Now, I wonder if
Yeah.
this has happened to you. The one thing that I've noticed that like quarantine or self-isolation, whatever this is called, is done is it's awkwardly made me a lot closer to a lot more people just because I think we're all kind of craving that like normal social interaction that we have. But like I've now interacted with my family from the Netherlands more than I have probably in my entire life. I know that I've talked to my parents more often. I feel like awkwardly more like friends I haven't talked to in a while are like, "Hey, you want to hop on a Zoom and like catch up?" And like that didn't happen normally. So like while we're all isolating, I feel like because of the technology we have now, we're also kind of getting awkwardly closer together in some ways. Do you see that at all?
You know what? Absolutely. I mean, like I'm really close with Maggie's family, and so like they'll jump on, FaceTime and stuff to talk with Annabelle and whatever, and they're only 2 hours away, and normally we see them pretty frequently. Probably not as much as we'd like to, but just life in general kind of gets in the way. But um, we've been doing that. Oh, I mean, just today, Maggie's brother FaceTime Maggie to talk to all of us and show the newest member of his family. He got this cute puppy,
Oh,
and so like he introduced it to us on FaceTime and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool. And um, yeah, like I never thought of really the social aspect from Annabelle's perspective,
hmm.
but like she's gotten on Zoom sessions like. Um, there's been a couple of times where all the girls in Sunday school, one of the parents will start a Zoom session and they all get to interact. They just plop them down in front of the computer and they chit chat and whatever. And like the conversations are hilarious. Hearing 5 and 6 year olds talk about absolutely nothing is just, I mean, it's hilarious. So they've done that. They have their Sunday school on Zoom. So they did that
Oh
this
wow.
morning. It's crazy the technology that we have available and how crucial that is for us, like right now in this moment. because without those things, I mean, yeah, we got our cell phones, yeah, we got FaceTime, but like Zoom is just blowing up. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Well, I can't.
And I've been using Zoom for years.
And like all of a sudden, it's just like exploding.
Yeah, yeah, and and like I still don't, no offense, and I'm not, we're not sponsored by Zoom or anything here at the Common Collective, but like I like that way better than GoToMeeting. GoToMeeting was kind of, to me was kind of clunky anytime that I used it, but Zoom is just like it's so user friendly, and you just pop right in and you're off and running. Um, but yeah, so things like that, like I've noticed it's good for
Yeah.
her, for Annabelle, because she really misses her friends and stuff, and she's got you know two people in their 30s that are just like, well, I got to do the dishes and I have adult responsibilities and we'll have to go do this. And, we're trying to be creative and stuff like that. But I think it's working out really well. She's got like, one of her best friends that, they jump on Zoom, once or twice a week too, just to, chit chat with each other. So definitely she's getting more interaction than
Yeah.
that. I'm either working or struggling to keep my sanity. So that's not too fun to talk to somebody who's in that kind of a spot. So um but the good thing is I definitely, I've been working out a lot
Good.
more so than ever before. And so that's kind of weird, like there's this consistency, I like have this routine and whatever. So yeah.
Well, and I want not to get like too deep in anything, but what are you doing to help with your sanity? Because like, I mean, that's part of it too. Is like there's this constant like looming like, hey, there's this like weird, terrible disease out there. You could get it, or people you know and care about could get it, and it could go really terrible. Like you have to sit at home and you can't like go be action hero about any of this stuff. Like what do people even do to like maintain sanity? I mean, I know me personally, I've been playing board games a whole bunch more. I've been playing video games. I've been reading a lot. Like, kind of a lot of like, trying to separate myself from the reality of it all and not dwell on it too much. But like, I've started a yoga routine. I've started, like you said, more routine. But like, what do other people do? Like, what do you do?
I mean, you nailed a couple of points there. I mean, I do some of the same things. I do yoga because like I get really stiff, like especially like my hips and
Uh,
stuff like that. Like I remember when I joined a gym like 2 years ago or something like that, when we were living in Murrieta, and um I took advantage of the free 30-minute personal trainer session,
yeah,
right? And so this guy's like, okay, now go into the squat position, and like I thought I was doing it, and he's like, "Are you? Is that as far as you can go?" And I was just like, "Okay, clearly I have no clue what I'm doing." And I was like, "Yeah, I can't go any farther. I'm gonna fall over." And he's like, "Man, you must have really tight hips." And I was just like, "Yeah, possibly. Like, I have no clue. I'm like completely a novice at being in a gym and dealing with a personal trainer like yourself. So." Like just teach me Obi-Wan. Like I have no clue what I'm doing. And what was funny is that same day, like he had me doing like these sets of, you know, with a heavy ball, and like I can't even remember some of the stuff, but he had me run up and down two flights of
wow,
stairs and then do a lap down this track and whatever. And he had me do it like 5 times or something like that, and like I was dying, like dying. And I finished,
yeah,
right, and so we went back to the table to discuss, further sessions and stuff like that. And I'm like, I felt bad because I was like, dude, I'm not gonna use you. Like, I just don't have that kind of money. But he sat down and we started talking back and forth and asking me some more questions. He's like, you know what? I'll be right back. And I was like, okay. So I'm sitting there, and it literally, I had to have been sitting there for at least 35 minutes before somebody came back over. And, so this female comes back over and she's like, "Hi, my name's so and so. I'm sorry that this. I'm sorry for the wait, but the your trainer, I can't remember his name. Um, he passed out." And I'm like,
What?
"He passed out? Like, he didn't even do anything. He was just telling me what to do. Like, how is he passing out? I'm still standing up breathing. Like, what is this?" But yeah, like apparently, like this guy like does Krav Maga. Like the dude was in excellent shape. And like I was just like, what? And I like as I'm leaving, I finish up with her. She covers for him. And as I'm walking out, like he's up at the front on the floor with like an ice pack on his head. And I was like, "Hey man, I hope you feel better. Take care." So it had to have been like the weirdest thing, like on both of our parts, right? I
Oh
know I felt kind of
man.
awkward, like the personal trainer that's supposed to be like getting me in shape so I don't act like that, is acting like that on the floor. So I don't know if he was sick or what, but like I felt bad for the guy. But that was kind of like my first intro to a personal trainer and stuff like
That's
that. But yeah,
crazy. I
yeah, it was
He
pretty
passed
funny.
out. I mean, did you ever find out what happened to him?
Nope, nope. And like I'd go back and I never saw him again after
Oh
that. Like I don't
no.
know if it was just like the shifts, like when I would go like kind of like at night. But I mean, I was there at night when he was there when they scheduled. And I never saw him again.
I really genuinely hope he's okay. I hope like
Yeah, no, no, he was
oh
okay. Like
good.
he gave me the thumbs up and yeah, but he just wasn't feeling so hot. Like something hit him. Like
Wow.
I don't know if he came down with a bug or he was just like maybe he was telling me maybe it was out of breath for him because he was telling me to do all this stuff and he just like was kind of in solidarity passing out for
The
me. I don't know.
shock of your tight hips just caused him to pass out. He's like, "I've never seen them so tight."
Yeah, dude, it was pretty
Wow.
bad. But anyway, so what back to your question. Yeah, so like, yoga, doing my workout routine, I make sure that I walk at least 5 miles every day, 5 days a
Wow.
week.
How Do you have a
Yeah,
treadmill
and
or do you
then
just like pace your house?
no, no, I actually
Oh
go
wow.
out. Yeah, we have like kind of like a bike trail. Like there's this reservoir like right across the street from my house, and it's got almost like a bike trail, paved bike trail that goes all the way around. So I've found the distance that I need to travel or the route that I need to travel to hit 5 miles. And it kind of happened by accident once I realized like holy smokes, I just walked 5 miles. Like I was like, okay, this is gonna be my benchmark because I can do this, and then like I'll just kind of like increase. But I usually go at night and there's like nobody out there and it's really cool. You can hear like frogs and you know crickets and birds and stuff like that. And um, it just it feels nice because it's nice and cool. And I just walk, throwing on a podcast or some music and just go. But I'll do that, and then video games. That's a
Yeah.
big one. Um, and honestly, sanity for me is just having a moment to unplug, and just kind of veg out. Like if my brain doesn't have to do anything, like day in and day out, especially with the job, which like your brain's constantly
Yeah.
going and going and going, and like so I can get really burnt out. Um, but the one thing that really was helping me for a while, I need to get more of it, but it's this Four Sigmatic coffee. Did
You
I tell you
did
about
tell
that
me
already?
about that. Yeah.
Okay. So I got these like little instant packs,
Mhm.
right? And like you just heat up some water, throw it in, it dissolves, you stir it up, and boom, and it's mushroom coffee,
Oh yeah.
right? So it's like lion's mane and chaga, I think
I
is
don't
how
know if
you
I know
pronounce it.
mushrooms, but I'll totally take your word for it.
Yeah, well, they help support like clarity and brain function and all that kind of stuff. They're really good for you. It's got like half the caffeine regular coffee has in it.
Yeah.
And so I'm horrible at being healthy. Like I'm gonna just be honest with you and everybody else. So like I'll kick off my day with like an energy drink, no sugar, no carbs, right? So trying to make
There
good
you go.
decisions. And then like at about 1 o'clock, I'll throw one of those a cup together and chug on that, and that'll get me through the rest of the day and the evening until it's time to just say, all right, Anthony's done for the day. He's not doing anything else.
Wow. I mean,
So
that sounds like a pretty decent, like, I mean, at least from my perspective, a pretty decently healthy regimen. Like, you're not like rolling out of bed and you're like, what'll get me through today? Cake. And like having some cake in the morning, or like, well, no one's here to watch me eat this pie. Like, it sounds like it's better than that.
yeah, No, it's definitely like I do intermittent fasting,
Good.
so I don't eat, till like 11 or
Mhm.
12 usually. I try to every day. But like my biggest thing is
Yeah.
snacks. Like I'm a big if you ever seen that like clip of that toddler, she's probably like the 2-year-old little girl, and she's got like no teeth, and so she's kind of got almost like a lisp, and she's like snack, and she sounds like she's possessed. Like that's totally me, like on every level. And it's always at night. Like it's the worst time to get the snacks because I'm about ready to go to bed, and like at 10:30 I'm like, dude, I totally want to get like a snack right now. And yeah, so
I wonder why that is, because I have that same thing. Like, it'll be like 10, 11, and I'll know that, like, eating a whole bag of chips is terrible for me, but that's all I wanna do right now.
it's boredom. Like for me, sometimes it's like a comfort kind of thing,
Yeah.
I think. And I've always been like skinny and lanky, but like, you know, being once I got married, my wife is an
Mhm.
amazing cook, right? And she cooks all the time, definitely dinners every single night of the week almost. And it's all her fault. Like I got fat. I don't know what else to
You're
say.
just
Like,
blaming your wife.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
dude.
no.
Like I was fine at 135 pounds when I met you at like 26 years old, 27 years old. But now at 34, like I'm like a buck 65, and I'm like, dude, what did you do to me? Like, so
Oh, no. I mean,
yeah,
well, I mean,
yeah,
it's kinda what you said, though. For me, it's always kinda comfort, like food is, and especially, like, since if you think too much about what's going on, it seems stressful. Like, I've definitely been, like, snacking a little bit more lately because, like, "No, it just feels good. Like, let me just do this nice thing for me."
yeah. Exactly. It's kind of like a reward, right? Like I put on pants today, I deserve a snack. Like,
Yeah.
like it's just like the simplest things that you'll find an excuse to like give yourself a snack. Yeah,
Well, for
absolutely.
real, and I mean, even like the comfort of like lately for me, the comfort of a routine. Like I've never really been kind of routine kind of guy. Like when I used to go into the office in my old job, I would wake up 10 minutes before I had to be out the door, like rush to get everything on and situated and get out the door and get to work as soon as I could. I now wake up like 2 hours before I have to start work, do yoga, shower, breakfast, walk the dog, like make sure I do this whole like set routine every day just because it's so comfortable now. Like it's gotten to be so reassuring to do that kind of stuff.
Right, 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 right. How is the new job?
It's nice. It's definitely a different vibe. It's a much larger company, so we have literally an entire support team just to help out my team, which is like something that I'm not used to. So there's like official channels for things, and it's actually kind of reassuring. And I'm not stressed out every day at the end of the day, so I feel like I'm doing something wrong. And I had that little like battle with myself last week where I was like,
Nice.
yeah, I was like, I'm not so stressed that I'm crying at the end of the day. Maybe I'm not doing my job right.
Right, 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 right. I know I've been there many times myself. So, did they have like an easy transition into like working remotely? Because you were supposed to go into the office, and then lo and behold, the day that you were supposed to report, LA was like, no, nobody's going anywhere.
Yeah, so the company actually really thrives on face-to-face communication to the point where when they all
Mhm.
transitioned remotely, nobody knew what to do. So they just started like basically throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what stuck. So like when I started, people were doing Zoom meetings, they were doing loop up meetings, they were doing WebEx meetings, they were doing GoToWebinar meetings, just whatever thing they found is what they would host a meeting through. And then like through the last couple of weeks, we've slowly been refining like, okay, we don't want to use GoToWebinar. We don't want to use LoopUp. We might want to use WebEx, but most people are using Zoom. And we're trying to like narrow ourselves down to like one or two services that fit. But for the most part, like it was a complete upheaval for our entire office. And I'm like, well, all I ever know is working remotely, so it's totally fine with me.
Right, right, right. That's exactly how I felt. Like when, so just for everybody that's listening, this is how Devin and I know each other. I started in shoot, what was it, August, at the company that Devin previously
Hmm.
worked for, customer support specialist for a software company, and that's how I met Devin. And Devin like trained me, like gave me full access to him, helped me out tremendously. I could not have done it
Oh,
without him.
thank you.
But that's how we got to absolutely, man. That's how we got to know each other. And we we share a lot of the same viewpoints, and you know, geek out on a lot of the same stuff and stuff. And so that's how we know each other. And so I work remotely. My I guess contract or agreement or whatever was I report to the office that's in LA once a
Mhm.
month. Other than that, like, I work remotely, and so we use Zoom like
Oh,
all the
yeah.
time. Like, I'm falling apart at the seams, like, I can't do this. Oh, jump in a Zoom session. And Devon's like, oh, this is what you gotta do. So yeah, it's the tools again, like that we have at our disposal right now for this situation is really kind of crazy, especially around the timing.
Well, have you seen, like, some of the old letters from, like, I don't know, like, the big one that's going around social media now is one from F. Scott Fitzgerald, the person that wrote The Great Gatsby, about how he was
Mm.
quarantined with the Spanish flu, and, like, all they had to do all day was, like, read and write letters and make sure they still had enough candles. And, like, that would have been terrible. Like, I couldn't imagine, like, just sitting around all day like, "My dearest Martha, the second day in quarantine is," like, it would be so boring, and, like, now we just have so much.
Uh,
So, like, some ways it's terrible, but in other ways, like, I feel like I'm really kinda lucky to be, like, at this time in, like, the world's history to be quarantined, because, like, I just spent 2 hours on on, like, a virtual session with my friends from Pennsylvania, and, like, it was like we were in the same room, and that's really crazy and cool.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, like, this quarantine, I think it's got me a little weird. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah?
I've gotten a little weird. Yeah. Like, most of it is just to tickle my own brain and make myself laugh. But like, I, I had this idea. So, I'm trying to like entertain Annabelle and keep her, like going and whatever. Um, and try to utilize this time to like you know make some good memories and just spend time with her. And so the other day, I think it was like literally day one of the official quarantine, and I was just like, this is like my everyday. I I said, I took a picture of us. I painted both of our faces in camo,
Aw.
and I had like this, camouflage boonie hat or
Yeah.
whatever. Gave her a bandana around her head, and we just like were kind of like hiding on the side of the bed. And I was like, day one of quarantine, the walls are listening to our conversations. And so I did that, and then one day before work last week, like ideas will just like hit me, and if I follow through on them, I'm like, okay, cool, like this, we got to do this. And so she's like ultra fancy,
Yeah?
right? So she's all into fancy Nancy and all this kind of stuff, right? So I was like, dude, let's do a spa day. So I threw on my robe. I was like, go get your robe. We're doing this right now. I wrapped her head up in a towel. I wrapped my stupid dome up in a towel, and I smeared just like I had no clue what an avocado mask was actually made of until I looked it up afterwards. So I literally mashed up an avocado and just smeared it all over each other's faces, like mine and hers, right? And then I didn't have cucumbers, so I used zucchini. And so I put zucchini, like, coins over our eyes. And, I tried to take a picture blindly. Like, dude, honestly, like to capture a moment, like this must be, if I can talk, what it feels like for these Instagram like celebrities, right? Like getting the perfect picture. Like for the life of me, I cannot take a picture if I can't see myself,
Yeah.
right? I'm trying to get her in, me in, and the picture that I actually got, she looks like she is so uncomfortable laying there. She's got zero, it doesn't look like she's relaxing at a spa at all. She looks so like rigid and just like, kind of like a hot dog in a hot dog bun, like just like, totally tense. I'm laying back like barely in the shot, and like we look ridiculous, but it was hilarious. Like it was a great time. She actually did love it. But yeah, that I've gotten very weird. Like quarantine can
Now
change
hold on, where
people.
is this picture? Because I need to see a picture of basically you and your daughter laying there with most of a salad on your face.
Most of a salad. All right, let's do this. So Let me see.
Because this is now like my, I don't know what this actually turned out to be, but this is like my new favorite like mental image.
All right, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna request you on Facebook because that's where it's
Good.
all at. Devon
Well, I
Struthers.
love like
There we go.
the idea, like that kind of idea where it's like I don't know what an avocado face mask is, but I know avocados in the name. It's an avocado. Like I had a
Yeah.
friend in high school who like really wanted, like, we used to live by Hershey, Pennsylvania. And the big deal in Hershey, Pennsylvania is you get a chocolate massage. And like it's like this whole massage where they have this like it's an infused kind of cocoa scrub that exfoliates, and it's supposed to be really nice for you. And my friend had always wanted this like cocoa like massage. And one day her boyfriend was like, "You know what? I can't afford this cocoa massage for you, but I made a homemade version of it." And all he did was take Hershey's syrup, warm it up a little, and put it in a cup, and then rubbed it all over her back. Not even close. She's like,
Well, yeah, you're supposed to put like honey in the like it was falling off of my face. There's just like globs. I sent you the request. There's globs that are just like slowly. It's like that scene in Wayne's World where they throw the pickle at the window and it's starting to like race
yeah,
down. Or no, Billy Madison. Billy Madison. They throw the pickle at the window and it's starting to like slide down and they're racing pickle slices or whatever. That's what it was like. These globs are just like slowly like sliding down my face. And dude, it was everywhere. Somehow my kid got it all over like the mirror, and I'm like, dude, I just asked you to go wipe it off your face, not use the mirror. Like, what are you doing? And then, yeah, dude. So apparently, like, there's supposed to be honey, which would help it stick better, I guess. And like,
oh.
there's other weird stuff. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
Also, I just found the picture and it's wonderful and everything I ever hoped it would be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
doesn't she look like she's having a horrible time? Like, she's just like, I cannot wait to get this stuff off my face. Like,
No, she looked like she's having a fine time. And maybe
and then
because,
if you scroll down, you'll scroll down and you'll see the other one, day one of lockdown.
let me see. Oh, yep, there it is.
There it is.
Oh, good.
I had it planned that I was gonna like shove some branches in that hat to really add effect to it, but I forgot. I got a little overzealous and jumped the
Well, no,
gun.
I've been
But
the same way though. Like, so I'm on an improv team, and we used to meet every Wednesday for 2 hours. We have a coach. We go through scenes. We get notes. All this great stuff. And we haven't been able to do that since we've been shut in. So every Wednesday we've just been meeting remotely, and our improv has gotten so much sillier and so much more like just completely absurd that like part of it I love because I think like that's where I want to be comedy wise.
that's
But
the
the other part of
best.
it's like
Yeah.
the other part of it's like after an hour and a half I'm like, how did we get here? Like we went on probably a
Yeah.
20-minute rant about like I was the mom and my two kids were confessing that they were serial killers without confessing that they were serial killers. And I'm like, what happened
What?
here?
Wow, that got dark really quick.
Oh,
Like
it
I
gets
said, quarantine will change you, man.
it will, man. And like I like the people that are like, this is my cocoon. I'm going to come out of this a beautiful butterfly, completely reinvented and healthier. And I'm like, not me. I'm going to come out with a weird sense of humor and a potato chip addiction.
Well, I'm actually glad that you brought up the improv thing because one of the things that I admire about you the most is um, how accomplished you are. At least if we're just two people in the universe and that's it, way more accomplished than I am. You are not only a published psychologist, you do improv and stand up comedy, you do your own podcast. Let's talk about that for a second.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, first off, I appreciate that introduction. That makes me sound way more impressive than I am. Thank you. Yeah, so my podcast is called You Have to Watch This Podcast. It is me and two other guys, Alan and Ryan, and every week we pick a movie that we know at least one of the other two people hasn't seen, and we make them watch it, and we get pretty raw, like, reactions. And sometimes it works out well, and we find some people's new favorite movie. And sometimes, like I think our most recent episode, I watch one of Ryan's favorite movies from childhood and just hate it, and then the really awkward conversations that comes from.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I
So that's your podcast, and so that's what's going on with that. And how often, how frequently do you guys like do
sure. So we have
episodes?
an episode a week. I think, yeah, you can
Wow.
find us on Podbean, on Spotify. I think there's Stitcher Radio. You can find us, Apple Podcast, that little purple icon. You can find us basically everywhere you consume podcasts.
And how long have you guys been doing that?
So Alan and Ryan have been doing it for about 3 years now, and then I joined on in the last year and a half. So I've been doing it for about a year and a half with them now, and it's honestly it's been great. I've been introduced to all kinds of movies I thought I'd never ever watch, and then I've been yelled at about movies that are technically classics that I can't stand.
Top three that you can't stand.
Oh
Go.
man, so biggest one is gonna be Sandlot. I know that's like a big
Whoa, wait a minute, dude.
yeah.
I literally just watched that one yesterday with Annabelle for the first time.
All
And you
right.
hate that one?
Quick thoughts on it. What did you think?
The Sand, like we're talking about like Benny the Jet Rodriguez and the guy with the horrific fish
Yeah, and
hat and the beast,
and
right?
forever. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
that one.
You hate that
So
one?
I don't have any nostalgia wrapped up in that movie at all. I didn't watch it when I was a kid. I watched it when I was a 30-year-old man, and I think the movie just doesn't hit well at 30. Like I could kind of relate to some of the kids growing up. Like the guy with the glasses, like that would have been me growing up. So like yeah,
Squints,
like
yeah.
I would have been Squints, like hands down. Uh but like just there I I think the whole genre itself of like the 90s growing up kids movie where there's like an outcast and then there's like someone who's like 30 hanging out with 10-year-olds that like decides to take in the new kid and like I don't know that for some reason that like just seems too formulaic and too like I don't know, too like cliched for me. And like 30 minutes of the movie is just a montage of the kids screaming. I don't know. It that's a super unpopular opinion.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll tell you what, like watching I haven't watched that movie in forever, right?
Yeah.
Forever. But I watched it yesterday and like maybe I'm just like overprotective, especially like with just how like things are portrayed in TV and movies and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Um about like what I show my kid. Like, the whole scene where, like, he, like, kinda, like, sneaks that smooch from the
Yeah.
lifeguard and, like, he totally, like, play like, that would not stand in today's
He
culture,
legitimately
like,
assaults her and then she
the
winks at him afterwards. Oh no.
right, right, what kind of message is that sending, right? And then, there I mean, the typical kids, like, when parents aren't around, they got foul mouths when they're speaking to each other and
Yeah.
whatever. And then the whole exchange between like the town baseball team and then the ragtag
Yeah.
group, like they're going back and forth, like all that stuff I thought was like hilarious when I was younger. And then like I find myself like going, every time like they a curse word's coming up, and I'm like, remember, oh, this is where he says,
Yep.
so, it was interesting. It was an interesting thing, but, like, I think that's a classic. I don't get nostalgia out of it because that wasn't really my childhood
Sure.
either. I'm not a big sports guy or anything like that, so the whole baseball thing I played Little League and was, like, just oh my gosh, that was one of the biggest travesties of my childhood was ever agreeing to play Little League.
Oh, really?
Um,
That bad?
yeah. Dude, it was bad. It was bad. And like because of my age, like I kept getting bumped up to like the next like level, like, single A,
Yeah.
double A, triple A. And I wasn't good. Like I didn't belong with those other players. Like I needed to stay in double A for 2 more years, with like, the fifth graders or whatever when I was in sixth
Yeah.
grade. And so like it was just bad. Like I would constantly dance in and out of the box because I didn't want to get hit, like just being a wuss about it and stuff. And like, yeah, dude, it was pretty bad. But I finally got up to like I think it was called juniors and then seniors, and then like once you got beyond seniors, you were like on the like the high school team and stuff like that. And so I was in middle school. I made it up to
Wow.
juniors, and like these kids were throwing like easily 70, probably almost 80 mile an hour pitches, and like I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn at that point. Like it was just bad. I had like a negative 0.5 batting average or something like horrible. Like it was just so ridiculous. And I was like, dude, I don't want to do this
Wait, did your
anymore.
coach do what my
So
coach did to me though? Because I was on Little League for a while too, and my coach, I couldn't hit the ball either. I was terrible at it. So my coach took me aside one time and goes, "You know what, Devon? Let me teach you what bunting is." And I was the bunting guy every time.
I tried bunting and I got my finger got popped and I was just like, that's a stupid idea. Like whoever thought of that is an idiot. Um, but but yeah, no, I'll never forget. Probably one of the most vivid memories was I finally got on base and I, went running from second and I was about ready to slide into the third and I slid into third and I guess I didn't slide early enough. And so my third base coach was some other dad on the team. And as soon as like I slid in, got tagged out and he said, "You son of a b," and like, just
Whoa.
like kind of like under his breath. And like I was crushed. Like I was like trying my hardest. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the greatest by any means. Like I was that kid out there in right field, not doing a darn thing. Kicking dandelions and stuff. And so um, I'm pretty sure I was crying because I was probably like in like maybe like fourth
Yeah.
grade or fifth grade, somewhere around there. And like, because I felt really like insulted. And so I remember like my dad got wind of it because he was there and he helped coach and stuff. And when I told him, like him and the third base coach, like almost fully got into it, like right there on the field.
Wow.
Like it was pretty, yeah, it was pretty intense. So that's probably like my only like cool memory. My dad tried to fight the third base
What's cool your
coach.
parents were so there for you. When I was in Little League, I was in the outfield. I don't know which one, right field or left field. Whichever one had the least action is where I was.
Yeah, that was where I got put.
And
Yeah.
all I did the whole time was dance and make up songs because nothing ever happened. So I'm like, well, I need to,
Yes.
because I think at heart I'm a performer. So I'm like, well, they're not, no one's looking at me for my baseball ability. Better become a pop star out
Right.
here. So I did.
Use your time wisely, right?
Exactly. I had a
Yeah,
captive
yeah.
audience. They had to watch me. And I think that caused my parents to not want to associate with anything that had to do with my baseball career. Like they'd like drop me off at games and be as far away as possible afterward, like while it was happening.
That's bad.
And I would
That's
have done the
bad.
same thing if I had seen Little Me. I totally get it.
I'm not missing anything with me dropping you off here, so we'll come pick you back up when the game's
In fact,
over.
I'm saving the embarrassment. You go ahead and do your thing. Tell us how many people
So,
clapped for your song afterwards.
well, now that we're on the topic of childhood traumas and parents, so
Cool.
you actually have a degree in psychology,
Yeah.
and you've published a couple of articles.
Yeah. So I actually got started in psychology pretty early. I wanted for the longest time to be a writer. I don't know why, but it was just like it was the career path when I was younger. But then I ended up having a job over the summer on a bus that was transporting mentally handicapped children to and from a summer day camp. And I wasn't the driver, I was the support. So I was there to make sure they got on and off the bus safely. I was there to make sure that they had everything that they needed. And this was like, I mean, I was like a crappy 18-year-old kid. I don't know why I had that kind of responsibility, but I did. And it honestly, it fascinated me. And just like some of the disconnect between how this program that was set up specifically to help them and to nurture them failed them in a lot of ways. And I'm like, I need to know more about this. So the college I applied to, I switched my major right away, got a psychology degree, and just dove in as fast as I could. And like honestly, my professors at that college were so great. Like they would let me be on research projects for them. They let me co-author papers. My senior project, I was able to put in for publication. And then like afterwards, I continued a bit of a career in psychology a little bit after that too, and was able to get onto some more publications after that.
So, from what I understand, there's the one, and these one, at least this one is one that you co-authored,
Hmm.
the reducing audio stimulus presentation latencies across studies, laboratories, and hardware and operating system configurations.
Yeah.
I have 0 clue what that means. I've gone over the article, and I still have 0 clue what I'm actually reading because that's just not in my mind. It is absolutely fascinating, though. So you have that one. You also have the effects excuse me, the effects of thunder, stereotyping, and cognitive load on impression formation. The
Mhm.
only one that we didn't get to go over was, Be the Data.
Yeah. So, all the ones that I have published are kind of from different facets of psychology. So the first one that you talked about has to do with taking psychology kind of out of the realm of, well, how does this make you feel? And self-report measures, which self-report measures are good, but in the end, they're just self-report. So I can ask you how you feel, and you can tell me how you feel, and you're either going to tell me the truth or lie, depending on how you want to approach this situation. And in order for psychology to become more of a science and less of a soft science or a pseudoscience in some cases, we need actual real data behind that. So the first paper that you talked about, the reducing audio latency, was how to present an audio tone or a noise in a reliable, consistent way to a participant, no matter where you are in the world. So if I have a study and I need you to listen to somebody screaming or to listen to a tone or get sort of stimuli audio feedback, I need to make sure that that's presented in a very controlled way. So I, as a researcher, know at 156 milliseconds, this audio tone started playing for exactly 100 milliseconds, then it stopped, and then that latency between when it stopped and when you get that psychophysiological reaction from the participant is really where all of psychology happens. So that was kind of the crux of that study, is how do we reduce that, and how do we I helped work on a device that reduces that and makes it more consistent across every computer in the world.
Crazy. And see, that's why I'm saying, like, your accomplishments, like, literally blow me away because I don't know people that are doing and have done the things that you do, so that's, I think, what fascinates me the most about
Oh,
it
well,
all.
thank you. um yeah.
Absolutely.
So the second one that you talked about is actually one of the areas of psychology I have the most interest in, and that's social psychology. And that paper was a little bit topical. I'm kind of dating myself with it because the paper came out around the time that Tiger Woods got in trouble for cheating. And
So 2012?
yeah, it would have
Yeah.
been almost exactly 2012 is when that paper came out. Um, and the point of that paper was impression formation. So basically, I think the way that that happened is Tiger's wife came to the media and said, Tiger Woods is cheating on me. Look at how terrible he is. And public opinion of him swayed in the other direction. They were like, oh, well, this guy we thought was a hero, we don't like him anymore. This was exploring what would happen if Tiger came to the news first. If he knew that this was going to happen, this was going to break, and what if he was the one that broke the story and said, you know what? I'm so sorry. I cheated on my wife. I did wrong. I'm working to make me better. Would that make people like him more, or would that make people like him less, or would it not matter at all?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that's kinda hard to say. I mean, with our culture today, which we'll get into the main topic of the podcast today, which for those of you who haven't read the description, it's altruism versus Christianity, and can they coexist and whatnot together. Um, but in our culture currently, let's just say that this happened in 2019 or
Hmm.
2020. If he would have come out and owned up to his mistake and whatever, and was apologetic and wanted to be, hope that people and his wife could forgive him for making a bad decision. um I think it would, compared to
Hmm.
2012, I think it would be completely a different
Sure.
outcome. I think maybe in 2012 that he might have had some, okay, well, at least you admitted to it, and so we can respect that. Just that's a horrible thing, but you know, at least you owned up
Hmm.
to it, right? I think you would have had the society, as far as their perspective. I think you would have had like this fractured picture of, just like we have now on everything else, like these groups that push this cancel culture, movement and mindset, you would have had those people. You would have had the people that are, are more gracious and say, hey, we all make mistakes, as long as you're taking the necessary steps not to do it again. These people saying, oh, you should resign from golf, you don't deserve that position or that money, and you're a horrible person. They want your head on a stake. And uh, yeah, it'd be really interesting to see, because if you just take politicians for example, no matter if they get ahead of the story or not, and it's this big, you know, PR, kind of, position. Um, I think it'd be way more fractured than swaying to one side or the other,
Well,
like in 2012 or
Well, and I think you're
whatever.
definitely right. And I think a lot of that has to do with just where we're at as a society. And not to get overly political about any of it, but I mean, at least my personal opinion is that we're in the middle of a transition phase where I think that every opinion that you said somebody would have to Tiger Woods is a valid opinion and an important opinion. I think that every side needs to be represented in that argument because I think we as a society are transitioning from a society where certain transgressions are overlooked, or there's certain people who can get away with certain things because they are who they are, and yeah,
Right.
that guy's just so great otherwise, so let's overlook this thing. And I think that that's abhorrent, and I think that we as a society need to understand that, and are understanding that. I just don't think that we yet know what to do with that information as a society. I think that groups will know exactly what to do with it. So you'll have the cancel culture that goes, all right, cheated on his wife, get him out of here. And they know they're right. And you have groups that say, well, he's so great at golf and he owned up to it. Don't worry about it. He owned up to it. It's fine. And they know they're right. And that's all of that's okay because we're moving to this place where that kind of systematic oppression isn't happening anymore. And that's the most important place to be. And I just think like right now we're in growing pains. We're like awkward me who thought he could grow a mustache and it was like 5 hairs, but I thought I was cool. Like I think that's where we are as a society right now, and that's great.
Right. Well, okay, let me ask you this. Do you ever feel like, because I mean, to me, and this is my personal opinion, and I know there's probably going to be people that absolutely hate me for saying the certain things that I'm going to say, but do you ever feel that because our society is so fractured and so vehement on these fractured positions, right? They're the people that, whether there's any truth or not, do you feel like we even live in reality anymore, because there is this fracture in society with all these different perspectives, and how vehemently people are um attached to those perspectives, and regardless of truth or evidence or reality or facts or whatever, it's like whatever they believe is that's the reality. So like I feel like there is, um we as a society are much more out of touch with reality than ever before. Maybe I'm naive, but that's what it feels like,
Well,
right?
I think it's an awesome question. I love talking about stuff like this. So, I think from a fundamental standpoint, and this might be a little frustrating, I'm sorry, but I think that from a fundamental standpoint, I think each person creates their own reality anyway. I think
Mhm.
regardless of political agenda, regardless of anything, reality is to you what it is to you. I think that's why you have so many people that like I don't know that have such drastically different lifestyles and could never imagine being happy living any other way. So I moved from a very small rural town in Pennsylvania, and I have a lot of really good friends who live there that they would never move. They would never move to a big city like LA. They think that life in rural Pennsylvania is it. They go to every high school football game at the high school that they went to. The farthest they'll ever go is they'll drive 10 miles up the road to the store and back, and that's so great for them. And they imagine my life as just nothing or like just this awful existence. And I have the same. Or the opposite. Like I could never live in just that place, and I would only be where I am now. And I just think that our realities happen to be different and that they're entirely subjective. But as far as it being historically different than any other time in our period, I I don't know if I agree. I think that now we're in such a unique time where everybody has their own platform to speak in a public way, and for a way that not only can be heard by everyone but consumed by people on both sides. So like if we think back to like, I don't know, like back to like the 1920s when F. Scott Fitzgerald was writing his plague letter that I was talking about earlier, like he would only ever interact with like his group of friends, and they were basically an echo chamber for each other. And if they met somebody that was
Mm.
outside of that group or thought different, they just weren't a part of the group. Maybe they'd make fun of them later, but then like they never dwelled on what they had to say. They didn't have this space where they felt like they were king or could talk about whatever they wanted, that then had different opinions thrown at them that they could then interact with. And I think that it's just, I think it's this weird time of like social media being this platform for voicing your opinion, and everybody kind of forming these little camps based on what their own subjective reality is. Does that make sense, or is that like the longest non-answer you've ever
100%.
heard?
No, no, no. That 100% follow you every step of the way. Absolutely. The only thing is, you know, well, and this is like I think a big character flaw in myself is that I tend to lean to a very fatalist point of view and perspective, right? And so, when we talk about something like a topic about reality and people creating their own realities, like I don't disregard that entirely. I think people can make their own life, right? However they
Hmm.
want, and they can live however they want. But to me, reality is something that is is just that. It's reality. It doesn't change. Like, we can't manipulate the definition just to fit our own lifestyle and say, oh, that's my reality. No, we all live in reality. Reality is what is real, and what you do within that is, I mean, really your own business. If that's how you want to, if you want to put on, a furry costume and be part of that community, then go for it. Like, that's not really reality, because that's not how people operate. You know, or society operates. That's just something that you're into. That's like a hobby, or if you want to go as far as, saying a lifestyle, and that's your lifestyle. You live in a furry costume, fine.
Hmm.
um but I think that if we what I notice a lot, and maybe it's just because, like, I'm growing up, and I'm becoming more aware of things around me, and my perspective is changing or whatever,
Hmm.
as far as how I look at life itself. um what I notice is that this well, let me back up. So, just like reality, there's a saying that is very popular nowadays, live your own truth.
Hmm.
Okay. The problem I have with that is there can't be more than one truth. Like, I can't be a serial killer and say I'm just living my truth. This is what I got to do. This is what's right for me. And then you have, the general perspective, hopefully, that it's wrong to kill people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I know that's kind of extreme, and it's kind of joking and whatever, but I mean that's literally what's happening. Is like, whatever I decide is the truth, and that's absolutely not the truth. You know what I mean? Like, the truth is black and white. It's either false, or it's true, or it might be a little both. Like, you might tell a half truth or something like that, but then it's not the truth. It's not the whole truth,
Oh, I
right?
love that.
So I that
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's what I see a lot happening nowadays, is people, like, redefining these terms that really, like, are I want to say, like, they're agreed upon. I don't know who said, okay, this is what reality is, and this is what we're all going to abide by, right? But what we all have come to understand and learn what is reality. I wake up every morning. I go, if I don't go to work, I don't make money. Or if I don't feed myself, I'm going to die. You know, those are realities. Like, that's the reality. The reality that we live in is we have good people and we have bad people, and we have silly people, and we have serious people. Those are it's like, it's a short spectrum when you break it down like that, but it's like black and white. And then there's obviously gray areas and a lot of other things, but that's a whole nother topic. But that's what I kind of see happening is everybody. Sorry, literally, like it's like I live on the green patch of grass in the middle of the NASCAR strip, like this main drag outside of my house. Like people are just like
They just gun it.
gunning it down up and oh my gosh, dude, it's
Oh
crazy.
no.
It's like a quarter mile to them. That's what I feel like. People are just redefining, solidified ideas of what life is like, and it's just like how number one, how do you do that, and how do you qualify that as something legitimate, and number two, what kind of effect does that have on the population as time goes on and we start to move in that kind of way of
Well,
thinking.
okay, so you got me thinking a lot with that one. So I have first off, I think this is so interesting because I'm the least black and white person I think that I know. Like I love moving around in the shades of gray of everything, and I think that that's so
Hmm.
fascinating. And I almost think that there's, I mean, and maybe we can get into this, but I know we still want to get to the main topic. But like, I almost don't think there are black and white like shades of like right or wrong in a lot of things, and we can
Hmm.
unpack that a little bit. But what I think the whole like my live my truth thing is, I think that's been abstracted a lot. I think there are some areas that totally makes sense to live your truth. Like I think that like a good example of when that is a powerful and true statement is I knew a lot of people growing up, uh, not a lot, but a few that were closeted homosexual, and you could tell that they
Hmm.
were struggling with that their entire lives because they grew up in this system that like, I mean, at least where I grew up, it was a society that didn't appreciate that and really look down on that, and you could tell they were struggling with themselves, and living their truth was saying, you know what, this is my true self. I have to stop hiding that. And then like once you clicked, you saw that change and you could see like, oh my gosh, there's so much more of a complete person because they did this. But I think that's been abstracted so hard into people like, well, I want to eat, 10 cheeseburgers tonight. I'm just living my truth. And it's like, it's not, yeah,
Exactly, and that
yeah,
I think that's the danger in that. You know what I mean? If something is not like like I mean rigidly defined, because I can totally get what you're saying about your friends, when you were growing up, and I can imagine. I mean, I can't say I've been in their shoes, but I can imagine something like that has to be super difficult. Like you're constantly struggling. I mean, it's just like when you have like if you've lied about something major, and it's eating you up inside, right? And you can't like that's not truth. You're living in darkness. You're living in, you're hiding something, and that's deceitful, right? And so if you're literally the perpetrator and the one that's affected, like that's a big contender battle right
yeah.
there, right? Like you're contending with yourself, and we all know we can be our own worst enemies, enough as it is, and then to add something like that to like your life, has got to be really hard. So I can get you on that one, and I'm not saying that it's not impossible to live your life being your true self. I mean that's to me that's separate from what that term is like evolved into.
The
Like people
abstraction of it.
have right, exactly. Like people just grab onto it and they want to make it their own and make it mean what it means to me. And I'm sorry, you can't do that. Like I'm not gonna call a dog, a giraffe just because I like giraffes more than dogs, which isn't true, but it's just an example.
Well, so here's something I've been
Um,
struggling with, then, and I'm curious how you react to this. So, I've recently started going to therapy, which, by the way, if you're ever thinking about that, like it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. But I'm learning that logical there's this difference in my mind between logical truth and emotional truth. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. So I have something I've struggled with for a while is this big sense of guilt for letting people down. I want to be one of those people that's like, good on their word. And if I ever run into a situation where I have to say no to somebody, that causes me like literal distress because I just don't want to do that. And it's just not how I'm wired. Now, logically
Hmm.
speaking, I know that had I postponed today and said, "Hey, I'm sorry I can't make it. Can we schedule for another week?" It would have been fine. You would have said, "No worries. We'll schedule for another time." You wouldn't have lost sleep over it. Emotionally, though,
Hmm.
I don't know that it would have been fine. Emotionally, it would have been so hard for me and I would have lost sleep over it. Because I'm just like, that's just me. So there's that logical truth of knowing, okay, the world in fact operates this way. Logically speaking, Anthony's gonna be completely fine with this. But emotionally speaking, it is like end of my world, ruins my day kind of thing. And I'm having a really I do this hard time of reconciling those two things because they're literally at odds with each other. It's one half of my brain saying you understand world is this way, and my other brain going you understand you are this way. And it's partly me creating
Do
my
you
own
ever wish?
reality. Yeah.
Do you ever wish that you just had a reconcile button that you could click to reconcile, and then click again to unreconcile?
Oh no. Oh, that was so close to our
Do
job.
you wish it was that easy?
I do wish it was that easy,
Uh,
but then I had to call tech support about it all the time.
Sorry, guys, that was a work reference joke. Anyways, go ahead and continue,
Oh
Devon.
no,
I'm
but I mean, but
sorry.
that was really, and I wonder where you land on that. Because so for my situation, me, I mean, our hypothetical situation, me turning you down for the podcast day and saying, "Hey, I can't today. I need to some other time." The literal black and white truth of the matter is there is no problem at all with me doing this. It is not an issue. But the shades of gray come from how then I feel about that. Like, how does that work with you then?
Like, what do you mean? Like, how do I perceive? Like, do I know that about you already,
Or
or like how? Like, if it was just a simple like, hey, can we postpone? And I said, yeah, sure, and how I would feel from that point on, or knowing all of this that you just described.
I think that like the knowing all of that, like how could that situation, like how so me saying like you saying there's one truth, there's like black and white to the truth, and then that people are kind of making their own. Is that like would the emotional truth of it being me making my own on top of what the real truth is, like the capital T truth?
Yeah. So no, I would still be black and white about that. To
Yeah.
be honest, I would. I mean, me personally, like, uh, like that would kind of make me have one of those kind of moments like, dude, don't be like that. Like I would want to figure out some way to reassure you, like, dude, we are
Yeah.
cool, like we're solid, like it's not it honestly, whatever it takes to prove to you that it is not a big deal, and that I want you to get a good night's sleep, and we'll reschedule and whatever, and everything is copacetic and as it was, as if it never happened. That would be what I would want to do,
Hmm.
right? Is that reassuring, that reassurance, providing that reassurance, and like, um you know like, again, for me, like, I believe that one of the spiritual gifts that I was blessed with is the gift of
Hmm.
encouragement. I'm not on 24/7 with that. Like I would like to be, like I wish I could just be that person all the time, but like I do know that that's something that I'm very passionate about. I do like, one thing that I like about training, like when I have, uh, you know in the past where I've had, um, jobs where I train, agents on customer service, or whatever. Um, like I get really excited, watching somebody get good or be good at what they do. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like I said earlier on in the podcast, I'm not a big sports guy, but I can like watch highlight reels of like the greats. They're like honestly like superheroes. Not everybody can do that as well as them, and they're like thriving in their
Hmm.
environment, right? So that part of me is, knowing that about you, would want to reach out and encourage you and just be like, dude, no, like this is good, like ditch
Hmm.
that, like that's an absolute lie that you're telling yourself. And again, so here's the black and
Hmm.
white, like, you're emotionally distraught because you feel like you're letting me down, but you have not. And the reality or the truth of the matter is you have not. So that emotional truth is an absolute lie. So it's an emotional lie. This is just something that you clearly are struggling with, and you don't like that feeling because you have a certain expectation of yourself, right?
Mhm.
And that can be hard. Like my kid is a perfectionist. Like she is so hard on herself for a first grader. And we just met a neighbor that lives behind our house
Uh-huh.
yesterday, and we were chit chatting, and he was like, "I bet you're really smart, and blah blah blah." She's like, "Well, not at math. Like I got a 90% on my test," and I'm like, dude, like, you know how badly I would have killed and maimed for 90% on my test? Like, my kid gets 100% on her test all the time, both spelling and math. Like, she's wicked
Yeah.
smart. And so for her to come out like, it was just like, really, you're upset about 90%? Please let me show you the D's and the C's that I used to get, and then we can talk about who's upset, right? So, but when you have these high expectations of yourself, because it's not like honestly, I don't think we put a lot of pressure on Annabelle at
Mhm.
all. Like, if anything, we're constantly trying to dial her back. Like, hey, it's cool to mess up. You learn a lot when you mess up, so it's not a bad thing. You know, don't totally like implode on yourself because you didn't know how to spell please or purple or
Yeah.
whatever. Like it's just like, we're trying to curb that. We're trying to rein that perfectionist mentality in, because I think that's like that's going to be like one of her like deadliest tools, like as she gets older,
Yeah.
right? And so like we want to foster that, but at the same time, like I don't want her to feel like she has to live up to any like expectation for me and my
Mhm.
wife.
So then so you would
um
separate that emotional truth then and say, "Look, like, the logical truth is what's gonna win out here. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you understand that, you validate."
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what you feel, Devin. Your feelings don't matter,
Nothing
okay?
matters, only the real truth. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think that's the danger, is when we let those, whether we call them truth or whatever, or this is how I feel, if we're not properly identifying those for what they are, then what are we actually doing to ourselves?
Mhm.
How much harder are we making it? And like I said, we're our own worst enemy, right? And we are our loudest voice, like that internal voice. Like, if we tell ourselves that we're stupid, pretty quickly we're going to start believing that we're
Mhm.
stupid. You know what I mean? And that has a traumatic effect on how we operate, how we think about ourselves, and whatever. And I mean, I could list several people that I'm really close to that have a poor self-image, and I'm one of them. You know what I mean? Like and so if we don't identify, especially the negative things that seem to be, look, if you the simple fact that you went and sought out
Mhm.
therapy, right? And this is one of the things that is coming up, your the actual the truth, and then your emotional
Mhm.
truth, right? If that has to say on some level that you recognize that there's an imbalance and that something isn't right, so now it's a matter of defining which one's right and making that black and white. You know what I
So
mean?
here's the thing that I think is most
Um,
interesting about that is, and I love that. I love that approach to it, the emotional truth, and like you being able to like seek that out. And a lot of what we had mentioned was like when that's a detrimental behavior. So obviously, me being distraught over something that's totally not worth it is a bad behavior and is counterproductive to
right.
living a happy life. But I would almost say that living the emotional versus the logical truth in some cases is the most important thing that a person could be doing it sometimes. And the example that I want to give is I watch a show called Shark Tank quite a lot, but is being an entrepreneur. And I'm kind of like,
Mm,
since I watch Shark Tank a lot, I'm kind of in that mindset. But I think that a lot of the beginning of an entrepreneur's lifespan will take maybe Elon Musk, for example. There were times when Elon Musk was one company payroll check away from losing it all. And I think that if he were to look at the logical, like capital T truth of his company at that point, he goes, you know what? I can't do this. Like the numbers are failing. This is the time to pull out. And I think there's some times when he has to start living in that emotional truth to shield out that the logical capital T truth go, no, I have an idea. I'm going to revolutionize. I mean, his politics and weirdness aside, like I'm going to try to do all of these good things and I believe in me to do it. Shut out what the capital T truth is and just live his life that way. Or even like, I mean, even stand-up comedians. I Every stand-up comedian that's ever done stand-up comedy is absolutely awful their first like year to 5 years of doing stand up. That's just how it goes. Sure, they'll have some jokes, but Mike Birbiglia, one of my heroes, said that like starting out is like playing jazz, where you'll see people nod along to your jokes.
Skits, cats, yeah,
Exactly.
no,
And like you'll be
yeah.
doing this stuff and improvising and you're not sure if it's working or not, but you have to keep telling yourself that emotional truth of this is what I meant to do. This is the what I'm going to do. I'm going to ignore the logical part of this that's saying I'm not doing well and do the emotional part is important. And like how would you reconcile that then?
Well, I think what you're describing, and I I don't have any like clout in this area at all. Like psychology fascinates me, right? Because
Mhm.
I love figuring out how the brain works and things like that, and how people think and what certain stimuli like elicits responses and decisions and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But what basically what it sounds like you're describing is not necessarily emotional truth, but it's overcoming and persevering. Like everybody has those moments and probably multiple moments throughout their life where they're approached with a decision, and that's either
Mhm.
to keep going or quit, right?
Mhm.
And quitting isn't always negative, and it isn't always positive, and keep going, you know isn't negative, always negative, or always positive either. But it's a matter of, okay, is this what I am destined to do? Right?
Mhm.
Is this, can this work? Am I really looking at this, you know, in a logical and well informed way?
Mhm.
Or if I keep going, am I just digging myself a bigger hole? Like you literally are just self evaluating, like what's happening here,
Mhm.
right? And looking at the facts regardless of how hard they are to look at, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, this is a bad idea. Like, just because I thought I was destined to be, a Tommy Chong pothead,
Hmm.
that would continue to smoke pot until into my 80s, that's not a good life decision, right? But I know I could do it, and I know I could do it well, and I
Yeah.
know a lot about it, so it's kind of it, again, that's why I think it's so important to have a solidified reality and a logical perspective when it comes to especially something like that, right?
Yeah.
But just because you run up against, because I've seen Shark Tank plenty of times, and
Yeah.
like some of those guys, like, I mean, walk right into, right in front of a firing squad, and others get slammed for no reason, and it's just like, dude, like, I get this is a reality show, and I get that you're putting on this whole, these whole personas and whatever, but that's a good idea. You know what I mean? And if they had somebody like you as maybe more of a mentor rather than a loan, like, you could probably help them get to the next level. They might just need some
Yeah.
help, and again, that comes back to evaluating, like, what am I missing? Why is this not happening? Is this because it shouldn't happen and I'm not meant to go down this road and I don't have, the necessary tools? Or could this really work and I'm just missing something that I haven't hit on yet? And I think that, if you want to use the Elon Musk as an
Mhm.
example, like, that dude is otherworldly. Like, he doesn't think like the rest of the human
Yeah.
population, right? And so the the entrepreneurial spirit, in successful entrepreneurs, is when they come up against those things and they hit those obstacles, it's just like any other obstacle for anybody else. Can I get over this, or is this going to point me in the or am I supposed to go in a different
Yeah.
direction? Let's just say quitting wasn't an option, but there's this roadblock that you hit, and either you can blast that thing with TNT and plow right through it and keep on going and hit your success point, or you can change things up and say, I actually need to take this in a different direction and still be successful and still going away from that obstacle because it's guiding you. Like one of the greatest things that somebody told me was it was a they weren't like a pastor or whatever, but they were kind of like a mentor in the church, and we had a small group, and the guy said that like I think what I was struggling with at the time was, what am I supposed to do? Like, what am I supposed to do with my life? Like, that's been probably the biggest question that's plagued my life, even to this day. Like, what am I destined to do? Like, where am I supposed to
Mhm.
go? Um, he said that life is kind of like bumper bowling, right?
Okay.
Like we we all have the same destination,
Yeah.
right? Like Christians, we want to spend eternity with Jesus in heaven and God the Father, and that's where we're gonna live out eternity in perfect bodies and glorify the Lord,
Mhm.
right? That's our end game. But if that's my destination, like what am I supposed to do in the meantime? And I can pray and say, God, tell me what you want me to do. Like, what should I decide? And God doesn't always work like that, right? And so he said, God kind of puts the bumpers up on the gutters, right? And you're the bowling ball, the pins are the end game, and in bumper bowling, you're bumping up and down the gutters. Like it's not going to be a straight
Mhm.
path, because sometimes difficult situations are presented so we learn,
Mhm.
right? Like I was like I mean like a tear away from becoming a wildland
Yeah.
firefighter. And this is like a very pivotal moment. Like I wanted to leave the company I was with. I didn't want to do that anymore. And my wife and I were talking, and I said, you know, I just don't know what I want to do or what I can do, because I've been in customer service in all different facets for over 15 years now. And so she said, well, you're really good at helping people and encouraging people. So how would you like what do you think you could do in that respect? And I thought about it, and she actually hit it first. She said, why not be like an EMT or a firefighter? And I was like, okay, I think I could do
Yeah.
that. And so like I started researching and figuring out like my next moves, like what do I need to do? And so I called the local fire stations, and when we were living in Marietta, and um they didn't have a volunteer program, so I couldn't get in that way. And they were like, oh, well, the academy, takes two outside, individuals outside of like the ROTC
Mhm.
kids, from high school to bring into the academy each year or whatever. So you could potentially be one of those, and that might be a road that you want to look down. So I started looking into to school loans to make myself more marketable and get a fire science degree
Oh,
and stuff
wow.
like that. And then when I heard $30,000 for tuition, I was like, yeah, that's not as attractive as I would hoped. And so that kind of stalled, and then a couple of days later, my wife was like, I got this, like, I found this random post on Facebook for an open house for the US Forest Service, and their office is in Corona, which is like probably 30 minutes away from where we were living. And so they said, no experience necessary. Come meet, the crew, find out more about what the U.S. Forest Service offers as far as a job. Um, Leave your resume. We'll give you a call. So I was like, okay, all right, I'm gonna make a jump. And so I went down there, met a couple of guys. I was like, dude, this is pretty freaking cool, because like basically you go camping,
And, like, that's the job.
and it's a minimum of like 2 weeks where you're just literally camping out in the middle of nowhere and you're fighting fire. Like, that sounds like a cool job to me,
Yeah.
to be
Oh,
honest,
yeah.
right?
To anyone, I'm
And
sure.
so right, and so, I was like, "Dude, I like nature, I like camping, I like, living as a survivalist, and I'm a prepper and everything and whatever." So, Then the ball started rolling really
Mm.
quick, and they called me back. They called me in for an interview. They called me back after that and said, "Hey, welcome to the crew." And I went through all my tests. I packed my pack test. Basically, like, it's actually kind of a wimpy test, but like for people who aren't in shape, it's pretty bad. Like, so you have to do what was it? You have to do, like, I think it's like 3 miles in 45 minutes wearing a 45-pound uh,
Okay.
vest, and you can't run.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, and so, like, it was intense because you're literally, like, speed walking, and, like, their idea was, like, you have to have one foot on the ground at all
Sure.
times, so, like, if you're running, you're kinda, like, having that, like, mid-air
Yeah.
gap kinda thing, so you would have to speed walk, and to keep up that endurance, not being in shape, um,
It's tough.
that's
Yeah.
difficult when you have an extra 45 pounds on your shoulders,
Yeah.
right? So I passed that, and the saddest thing was there was this guy that was probably 10 years older than I
Mhm.
was, and, like, I mean, he was one of my crew leaders, ultimately. But we all have to do that every single year, and he's literally smoking a cigarette as he's doing this, and, like, finished before me, and I was like, dude, are you kidding? Like, this guy was the ultimate, like, just total, just he was the
Just like
man.
Ernest
So,
Hemingway with this backpack just running through. Or sorry, power
dude, I was
walking.
just like, "How is that guy not dying right now?" Right? And, like, I watched him pound, like, 2, Mountain Dew Amp, like, energy drinks right before, and I'm like, "Dude, this guy's, like, asking for, like, a heart
He
attack."
stopped in the middle,
Like, it
eat
was
some, like,
crazy.
fried chicken wrapped in bacon. No problem.
Yeah, like, taking a break or what. Anyway, so, I passed all my schoolwork, and I almost, like, you know this about me, like, I used to have anxiety, and I actually I had an anxiety attack that I almost quit halfway through, like, the
Oh, wow.
course, like, for the books and stuff like that to take my test. Like, it was literally the second to the last day of my training, and I was afraid I was going to fail, so I was ready to quit because I couldn't take the physical manifestations of the anxiety,
Wow.
right? And my friend who I had met there, we ended up carpooling and everything. Totally cool guy. He had done some stupid stuff, and he was on parole. And his dad was like a retired fire chief, really well known guy in the county of San Diego. His brother was a firefighter for Cal Fire, so it's kind of like in his blood, right?
Yeah.
And so he was like, "This is a great opportunity for me to do that." And a lot of times, like, the Forest Service will hire, convicted felons and stuff like that. So, anyways, he found out really early on that the chances of him actually getting selected because he was on parole were slim to
Oh,
none.
wow.
But he still went through it, and he said, if you quit, he didn't use those terms exactly, but he said, if you quit and I go and take these tests and pass, I'm going to be super pissed
Oh, wow.
because you have more of an opportunity at this, at actually succeeding than I do. I take these tests, I go nowhere. It doesn't matter. So if I'm going, you better go. And, like, that was, like, super motivating for me. I was just like, dude, I can't, like, if I throw up and I get sick and I look like an idiot and, I'm, like, sweating and I feel like garbage and I fail, at least I came in, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I really had that battle with myself. So I went through all of this, passed everything, and I got my first call,
Uh-huh.
right? We were on call. So when the hot shots that ran the national parks and stuff, when they got called out on a call, we would come in to back up our
Uh-huh.
district. And then if they needed more, we were on call to go play backup for the hot shots when they were actually out on a fire and help them out. And so we got our first call. We went to the station. We started doing PT and everything like that. We got all of our gear signed out, and the biggest problem was we couldn't get transport.
Oh, no.
And this was the year that we had, like, the most horrific fires in the state of California, the Car Fire and the Paradise Fire, right?
Oh, right.
That was, I think, the Car Fire was the one that we were going to get called out on,
Oh, man.
right? And so, we couldn't get transport, so they had to disband our unit. So we got sent back home.
Wow.
Um, and then some things started changing. Maggie was going to get a job with the sheriff's department, with the county of Riverside, and we weren't sure what that was going to entail because that can take a long
Mhm.
time. So we were going to continue to forge ahead with the firefighter thing, and if that took off, then that's what was going to stay, and then Maggie would go another direction. Somebody had to stay home with Annabelle because if I'm gone like 2 weeks, 21 days at a time, there's nobody to take her to school. There's nobody to pick her up from
Right.
school. There's nobody, and she was just getting into kindergarten at that time, whatever. Hadn't even started school yet, and we were just like, And so then the opportunity came for us to move to
Mhm.
Orange, right, where we are now, and so I could still be anywhere and drive to Corona, not that far, you know. Um, and so at that around that same time, we had a vacation plan for our anniversary, and we had decided to move to
Mhm.
Orange, and it was all like in the same month of August,
Wow.
right? And so I got another call, and it just happened to be 14 days to the day I would have that I would have gotten back would have been the day before I left for my anniversary vacation,
Wow.
right? I totally could have gone. And so I said to my crew boss, look, this is what I got going on. And we could say if we were available or
Mhm.
not, right? And I said, what would you do? Like, just you and me talking, because they can't guarantee you that you'll be back in any sort of time. And so he's like, honestly, family first, like, do what you got to do. There'll be other calls. And I said, all right, cool. I
What a
appreciate
cool
that. And
call.
so I was bummed. I wanted to go out on my first call and get that under my belt. So to speed up the
Mhm.
story, uh, we decided that when we got back and we got moved, that I would call my crew boss and say, "Hey, I'm now available. Please put me back on the list." Well, the second day we moved in, I broke my toe.
Man.
So being in these like boots, hiking, 10 miles one direction, at a time, I couldn't have done it. And then shortly after that, once like my toe started to heal and stuff like that, um, I Maggie got the job at the sheriff's
Mhm.
department. And so this whole idea of being this wildland firefighter totally crumbled and went right through my fingers.
Yeah.
So what was all that for? Why did I have to go through all that to not do it? It seemed like a complete other waste of time. And I remember like, I mean I was resentful, because Maggie got to do what she wanted to do,
Mhm.
and I was just like, like why, like what was the whole purpose? I would have rather have not done this at all, period, right? Than waste all that time. And you know, praying about it and everything, I finally came to the realization months and months later, like, dude, this was just a lesson in obedience. Like, God said, go there. And I paid attention, and I listened, because I mean, that's how I live my
Mhm.
life, and that's kind of like my point with that whole bumper bowling thing is, like there's no straight path in life, and, as a believer, I'm going down this path and, I'm bouncing off the gutters, but I'm still headed in that forward direction, right? As long as I'm making that attempt to make sure that Christ is the center of my life, and I'm, abiding by, the statutes and his word, then that's all I can really do and do my best at it, which tell you right now, I'm horrible at it. But apparently I'm still moving forward little by little. So thank God for that. But that's kind of like the image that I look at life through is, stuff's not always going to make sense. Like I don't understand why I had anxiety for as long as I did. I mean, I do now, which is another
Mhm.
crazy story, but like it's a roller coaster that we're on. We're all, headed to death is ultimately a physical death, and so it's just everybody's trip is a little different.
Well, and that's interesting. I mean, first off, that whole story was amazing. But I think the way that you process a lot of it is very interesting to what we were talking about. Especially the whole, like, at the end you were like, well, I just wasted all this time, and then eventually you came to, this was a lesson in obedience. Like, I I wonder what that means for our, like, black and white emotional truth versus, like, capital T truth versus, like, emotional truth kind of argument. Because, like, if we look at it through the lens of, like, cold hard logic, like, you weren't progressing in your career the entire time you were doing that. You made a couple of connections that were good, but how far did it really get you versus the emotional truth of, this was me progressing? Or or am I looking at that in a different way? Am I trying to force a fit that doesn't fit there?
Right. And I think the thing was is and those are all things that like I think people will go
Yeah.
through, like depending on what the main thing is or whatever. And in my situation, I went through all those things in my head,
Hmm.
like I was angry, I was resentful, I was bummed out, and those were all true emotions. Like I can't deny, and nobody can deny when they feel a certain way. Like the feeling is not the lie; it's what is fostering that feeling is what can be the lie,
Yeah.
right? And so the feelings are absolutely true. You feel something, you're sad, you're happy, you're depressed. It's a real feeling. There's no getting around that. But realistically, it comes down to the
Hmm.
reality and the understanding that you have. Like I could be off base with thinking that it was just a lesson in obedience, and that could be, my quote unquote my
Uh-huh.
truth, and what I'm telling myself. But that's honestly what I believe because nothing else makes
Yeah.
sense. Other than that,
Right.
like it was just like a stupid thing to do, but because everything was rolling so well,
Yeah.
like, I mean, it happened in, like, less than 2 months,
Wow.
which was blowing my mind. I was just like, "How did I just, like, come up with this idea?" If it was even my idea to begin with. How did this idea, start just like that and then blow up to what it was, and I'm wearing, the PPE, for the US Forest Service, like, ready to go fight a
Yeah.
fire. Like, how did I get here, right? Um yeah, dude, I don't know. I mean, I still believe that it's black and
Yeah.
white. I'm not gonna deny my emotions. Were they misplaced? Yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. That I will absolutely admit to. I had no reason to resent Maggie for her getting a win. Um, and I could have ultimately died, and God, was just like, I don't. It's not your time yet,
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna have you go out there, um, and there was quite a few people I think that got really hurt, and a
Yeah.
couple of them died on that fire,
Yeah.
and that very well could have been me, so if my time's not up, then clearly I'm not going into a dangerous situation unless I'm absolutely like, you know, destined to do,
Right.
so I think the emotions are real, and I think that's kind of a line where we can draw like, yes, I can identify I'm sad, I can identify I'm happy and excited or
Mhm.
whatever, and that be true. But again, especially when it comes to the negative, you know, like the reality behind it is I'm not bummed at all. So you shouldn't be either. Like you shouldn't feel that way, even though you do. The feeling is real, but what's I guess facilitating that feeling is the untrue. Does that make sense?
It does. It totally makes sense. And I think the part that would be so difficult for me is, I mean, not even, I mean, for lack of a better word, the clarity of it all. Where, I mean, it's so easy right now. If I'm in the middle of something that makes me feel bad, it's easy for me to go, you know what, this thing that's happening, regardless of what it is, this thing that's happening makes me feel bad. Therefore, I don't like it and I don't want it. And for me to say, okay, I feel bad, therefore that thing is bad. And I think that that presence of mind of saying, well, that thing that made me feel bad, I can acknowledge that feeling was bad, but that thing that was bad was actually a good thing, or was objectively not as bad as I was making it. I i think processing that isn't an automatic and fast thing. And I think that's, I mean, back way back to our earlier conversation of, like, people seeming to do these outrageous things or have these outrageous opinions. I don't think I think it's the lack of processing afterwards that makes it all feel so weird and so like divisive all the time. I think it's
Agreed.
people going,
Absolutely.
I this makes me feel bad, therefore it is bad. Now let's go on to the rest of my day. And I will
It's
never think
very
of that moment.
impulsive. It's
Yeah.
very impulsive. Like they lead with their first emotion or their first thought or their first, you know, idea, and they latch onto that. And some even that are given, absolute truth, will, you know, be a diehard for their original position. And I think that's a whole nother section of mental mental toughness that is in a negative light, where you can't stand being wrong, and you have a hard time admitting that. um so you'll stick to your initial stance, until you breathe your last breath. But I think, what like you said, people reacting on what they initially feel without processing. If you're not taking a moment to breathe and really think things through, you're potentially putting yourself in a position where it's just, you're setting yourself up for failure and disappointment. You know, I learned, not from being in the military, but just a random conversation with some random guy at a festival that I was at with Maggie and Annabelle. I think I started talking to him about his dog. He had a really cool pit bull, and we
Hmm.
were just talking, and I guess I breathed in a certain way, that he was like, "Did you serve?" And I was like, "Oh, absolutely not. Like, I wish I was that courageous."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Interesting the way that you just, took a breath. Like, in the service, we call that a tactical pause, and servicemen and women use that, especially when they're in tense situations, and they have to make a decision. It helps to kind of clear the mind, and
Hmm.
you just and then you make your move, right?
Interesting.
And I didn't even know I did that, and that's kind of something that I think just developed out of trying to manage my anxiety and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I do that frequently, throughout the day. And it's like, I've had people like say, "Are you okay? Are you having trouble breathing?" I'm like, "No, I'm solid." But he was describing what a tactical pause was, and what its use was. And I don't think that you don't have to be in the military or anything like that, or dealing with tense situations. But if you have a situation that you're involved in, and it's maybe like a hot button or something like that, if you're not taking a moment to self evaluate, look at it and try to look at it from all angles, any other angle that you possibly can think of before opening your mouth, um I mean, you're setting yourself up, like I said, for disappointment and making yourself look silly, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree. I just think that the processing part of it is tough. I think that as
Yeah.
with social media and with how we are able to structure our social circle in such a very precise way anymore. I mean, and even
Mhm.
when it comes to working remotely, like I don't have to interact in a meaningful way with another human being unless I choose to. So I can stand here with my ideas of how the world works, whether that's a an emotional truth, capital T truth, whatever, and I can say this is how the world works, and I can then structure every interaction that I have to feed into that premise. So if I don't know, for example, I want to believe that I don't know, Back to the Future 3 was the best of the Back to the Future movies, and that is my emotional truth, but I want to make it my capital T truth. I can live my life and structure everything in such a way that it becomes that capital T truth because I surround myself and choose to and can like specifically filter what I'm seeing and hearing to say this is what the real truth is because everyone I talk to believes it and that makes it more real than anything else. And I think that's what makes today so difficult, or I mean, not even today, probably just human existence so difficult, is being able to set yourself up in these echo chambers where your idea, no matter what it is perpetuated and is affirmed constantly.
Right. No, I totally agree. But what happens when you've built this fantasy world around the idea that Back to the Future 3 is the best of those three? And then life is just like, oh, yeah? And at some point down the road, totally dismantles your whole world that you built around that. Then mentally and emotionally, where does that leave a person who hasn't taken an opportunity to say, is that really what it is? Is that really the best movie? Like, am I jumping on a bandwagon or am I missing something? I mean, anybody could like a movie. Your buddy likes The Sandlot, you hate it.
Yeah,
It's crap to you, and I think both of those they're valid,
yeah.
because we all like and dislike, different things. Um, but using that analogy, where does that leave somebody mentally who, everything that they thought was true all of a sudden is not? Like they've been proven wrong and they can't avoid that. It's staring them in the face. You
Well,
know what
and
I'm
some of
saying?
that, yeah, and some of that is that psychological principle of cognitive dissonance. Is I think
Hmm.
one way and feel one way, and I'm being presented with a different thing. One of the kind of key, like one of the big studies that focuses on this is you are given a task that you have to do, a very repetitive, very boring task for about 20 minutes, and then we get a survey from you and we say, how did you like it? And everyone says they hate it. Everyone's supposed to say they hate it. Then they go, we are going to tell you to tell the next person in line this was the most fun, most exciting, best thing you've ever done. And that creates cognitive dissonance. You literally believe one thing about it, but you have to do the opposite, or you're being shown the opposite. How do you then respond to it? And what people found is that they couldn't switch their mentality if they weren't incentivized to do it. So if I gave you $5 to go tell the next person this was the most fun, exciting thing in the world, you would do it in a second. But if I just said do it out of the kindness of your heart and do it because we asked you to, you would have such a hard time doing that. And I think that that's partly what would happen if somebody who's built this echo chamber around, this particular belief meets this other force, is it becomes cognitive dissonance. And if there isn't a real tangible incentive to change their way of thinking, they won't.
Hmm. That's
I
interesting.
mean, I don't know if that's right or wrong. That's just, I mean, that's what I think. You know what I mean? Like that's, and I think that we see that
Well, I think that comes down to the
it
person.
does, and I think that we see
You
that a
know what I
lot
mean?
because I mean, I know that I've
Mhm.
had a good example. I was in a really, really abusive, terrible relationship for a really long time, and we had this big come together meeting where all of my friends met up and they said, Devin, look, this is really a bad relationship. Here's all of the things that we're seeing, and we're really worried for you, right? I had my worldview at the time challenged in a very severe way, in a very public way. And my option at that point was let's move on and let's agree. Here's the capital T truth staring me in the face, or what do I do? And at that moment I went, you know what, it's not me that's wrong, it's you guys that are wrong. I didn't have an incentive to change my mind about any of that. I had just their word versus what I believed was my truth. And it
Mhm.
was that made it very difficult for me to want to switch or for me to take what they were saying any more seriously. And I think that's pretty I think that happens a lot.
I do too. So what do you think as far as right now, what's your truth now about that situation? Has that
A
changed?
lot of I mean, yeah, a lot of it was I should have listened to them because they were pointing out a lot of very serious problems, and I did end up apologizing to a lot of them for some of the things that I had done while in that relationship. Um,
See, and that's why I think you are as great as I feel that you are, because it takes a really big man to be able to, go back and, their specific circle, even on a that should be easy, right?
yeah,
But it's not, to admit that you were wrong and apologize, because you probably didn't necessarily, they weren't expecting maybe an
no,
apology,
they weren't.
but the fact that you did that anyway, and you were just like, dude, like, I'm really sorry, like, I, I should have listened and whatever, like that's why that's one reason, let's put it that way. I feel the way I do about who you are as a person.
You. I mean, I appreciate that. But it's an interesting thing, like trying to get it like that essence of that like capital T truth, even when you know that it's there. Like, because
Yeah.
the points they were making made sense, and they were like, "Hey, this thing," and I'm like, "Oh, I've noticed the things that they're saying." Like, I know they weren't lying to me, but it's so hard to then switch that mindset that I don't. I think it's a more. I think it's more work than most people. I mean, not that I'm like trying to be like, yeah, look what I did, everyone, because everyone's done this kind of thing. Like everyone's switched their mindset on something. They've changed their mind. They hold different beliefs than they did when they were younger. It's just so difficult to do sometimes, though, that it's just easier cognitively and easier from an emotional and energetic standpoint or energy standpoint to just not do it and just say, you know what?
100%
Yeah.
agree, but at what cost are we willing to pay when we do that sort of thing? You know what I mean? Like I think that's where I've gotten to in my
Hmm.
life at this point is like if I'm not having an open mind, like just like right now, like we're going back and forth and we're not completely on the same page, but if if I'm not listening to
Hmm.
Devon and his perspective, am I missing out on an opportunity to have my perspective changed because I'm not living reality? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And constantly making sure that I'm questioning what I'm receiving and interpreting, and how that's fueling my actions and reactions to life, and my beliefs and whatever. At what price are we paying? How many months or years did you lose, with your friend saying this, that you could have been in a better relationship, or you could have been, a better friend, or been doing something much more positive for your own personal growth and development, emotionally, mentally, physically
Hmm.
even. What price are we paying when we're not actively seeking and asking, is this really the reality?
And I think that's a really good point to bring up because it is important because I genuinely I think that how anyone could approach whatever any semblance of truth is. I mean, first off, I have my nihilistic days where I'm like, what even is truth? Is there even a truth? Like, what does any of this
Yeah.
even mean? Like, but I think if you had to like, if you put a gun in my head, my realistic answer to what like any kind of truth would be is, if you've ever heard, I think it's a Buddhist proverb. It's about, I think it's like the proverb of the elephant, and the point of it is that the Buddha or whomever takes different pieces of an elephant. They like cut an elephant up, as disgusting as that sounds, and they hand each piece to a different blind man, and they said, "This is an elephant." So one of them gets a tusk, one of them gets an ear, one of them gets a trunk, etc., etc. And then afterwards, they say, "What is an elephant?" And one person goes, "Oh, an elephant is this, this very smooth, hard thing." Another one goes, "Well, that's absurd. An elephant is a really big, thin, rubbery thing." And someone goes, "What are you talking about? It's this like garden hose thing. Like you're all wrong." They're not all wrong. They're just all getting at different parts of what the bigger whole is. And I think that's mostly how we live a lot of it is I think that in
Mm.
our limited experience are what if we're lucky 80 to 90 years on this earth. I don't think that anybody can experience enough to ever say what like, hey, this is a real truth about anything. I think we all have our very limited perspectives and we're all given glimpses of what this thing is, and we're all just trying to figure it out based on what we have. And I think that's a little bit of a less, I don't know, a less mean way to look at it when people are just saying, like, hey, this is what I think is my truth. And they're just reacting to some of the stimuli they've seen. It's like those people with the elephant. They're just trying their hardest to say what a capital T truth is when only getting handed a small sliver of it, you know?
Right. No, I definitely see what you're saying there, and I could say, well, what are we really, what's really happening in that situation? They just have a piece of an elephant. So technically, no, that's not really an elephant. That's a trunk, or that's an
Hmm.
ear, or a tusk that belongs to an elephant. And yes, those elements combined do make up a full elephant. But Are you holding an elephant in your hand? No, because no one can actually
Yeah.
do that. And again, being very black and white, and saying, no, like that's ridiculous. But again, I totally am tracking with that, and the idea behind that proverb, I totally can actually relate to, oddly enough. Um, but again, being like, I think where where I struggle with those types of thoughts or philosophies or
Mhm.
whatever, is that, um, I, basically the topic that was never supposed to be a topic today, the reality, what actually is reality. And I promise, folks, we are going to get to the topic
Oh
that this
yeah.
podcast was supposed to be. But like, what it, am I really like? I want to deal with ones and zeros. Like, I want, and this is almost, this is actually to a fault. Like when my wife is telling me something, I just want the bullet points. Like, I like a good story and details and everything. But if you need me to, it's mainly when it comes to something she needs me to do or she's asking me to
Mhm.
do. Right? Hey, can you go do this and make sure that this is like this and blah blah blah. And I have like these, this instruction booklet. Like, I really just want like a PowerPoint slide. Like, just give me the bullet points and I'll figure it out and I'll get it done one way or another. It'll be my way, but it'll be done. I promise. Um, and so the like all of that other stuff, as broadening, oops, almost hit the mic and knocked it
Oh
over.
no.
As broadening as that, I'm like really animated talking with my hands over here. As broadening and open-minded as that is to think like that and philosophically
Mhm.
operate. I think what can happen, just like what initially started this rabbit trail, was, if, what people redefining everything or not having a solidified definition of A, B, or C, which technically philosophy doesn't really operate that way in itself. But what kind of time are we wasting on things that aren't really real and don't really matter? Um, what kind of lies are we actually believing? And what actually is the reality? Because I think that's what we essentially want, is to be involved in something real and authentic and genuine. We don't like, well, no, that's not true. We like processed foods and plastic surgery and stuff like that. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean. But like that, like waste, I don't want to say wasting time, because I don't think it's a waste of time, but
Mhm.
investing valuable time in something that's not necessarily, or could not necessarily manifest as something of importance for your life, for the betterment of it. If it's not producing any value in your life, why do it?
I that's such a good.
It's not even, I'm not even asking you a
No,
question. I'm
yeah,
just
just
saying, like, that's
rhetorically.
kinda like my perspective, like, what, yeah, like, why do it? Like, I don't like to waste my time. I do all the time. I just like to say and think I don't like to waste my time, And if it's, especially if it's something that I like doing that is a waste of time, then I would definitely defend that as well. But I don't like, let me rephrase it. I don't like having my time wasted with stuff that doesn't feel or fit, or that I don't agree with,
Mhm.
to a certain degree. I mean, I always like to keep an open mind and listen to other perspectives. But
Yeah.
if it's just garbage, like, ugh, like, I don't want it. I produce enough garbage in my own life for myself. I don't need anybody else's as well. You know what I'm saying?
I do. I totally understand that, but I have almost the exact opposite opinion on this in a lot of ways. I think I like to hear the nitty-gritty like details about everyone's life and about like almost everything, to the point where like this doesn't like track with who I am as a person almost at all, but I watched all of Love is Blind in like a day. And not because like I don't know. I mean, it was fascinating and it was like watching a slow motion train wreck, which was great. But also because I really enjoyed a that different perspective that it brought to me. Where like I genuinely believe that the hypothesis of the show is bananas. I think that the gimmick is you talk to somebody, and based on that conversation and nothing else, you know what I mean? Like that's how you're going to find the person you love. And there's a question there to be answered and all that stuff. But I think that everything it brings up is insane. And that's why I want that. I want to hear that other side, and I want to like live life through that those eyes for like a minute, because I that's a perspective I don't have. And I mean, hopefully we'll never have if half of the people on that show.
I was just gonna say, do you want that perspective?
Some of the people on that show definitely not. But it's like watching Jersey Shore and going, "My idols."
Oh
But
my
so
goodness.
on the topic
Yeah.
of TV shows, I'm so curious, have you ever seen the show called The Good Place?
No, I've actually heard good things about it, but I don't think there's interest there for me. But I mean, if you're recommending it and you're saying that it's good stuff, like I will definitely give it a shot.
So here's the thing is I like the show and I like the writing. I think it's funny and clever and witty. But the question that it brings up, and really the main question of the whole show is it possible to do good? And I think that really plays to your black and white mentality, where the construct that the show is built around is there's such a thing called a good place and a thing called a bad place. The good place are for people who earned enough good points to get into a place called the good place, and certain things will get you good points, helping out your neighbor, buying local and organic. Certain things will get you bad points, like murder or attending a Nirvana concert. And
Did you literally just come up with a segue out of nowhere to get into what we were actually supposed to be talking
I promise I
about?
didn't plan.
You literally just pulled that out of thin air off of a TV show. That was slick. I like that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I think that it challenges that viewpoint enough of yours, or at least speaks to that viewpoint of yours of black and white enough, that I would love to hear your take on what the show is saying. Because as a shades of gray guy, I'm eating it all up and I'm like, yeah, nothing's ever good or bad. But I wonder how somebody who says this is truth, this is not, I wonder how you would approach that show.
Well, I did know before this conversation what the premise of it
Uh,
was. And so, good place, good people, bad people. Um, Me personally, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that disagree, even in some of maybe in certain Christian circles, I don't know, but from that
mhm,
lens, I'll make that clear. We're all bad.
uh,
Period. We're born that way. It's innately, unfortunately, in our DNA. We are just bad people. Now, we can rate the degree of our badness,
uh,
right? But what what I believe is that we we don't know ourselves as well as we think we
mhm,
do, right? We learn about ourselves. We, learn tomorrow I'll learn that I don't like this, or I want to know more about that, and we're constantly learning about ourselves, right, as we progress through life. um but we're all, again, my personal belief, we're all innately bad. We just are that way. We have the potential to be horrific to one another and do horrible, horrible things, both to our planet, to people, animals, life in general. Like we're bad. We are one of the worst diseases, technically, and I say that very, very loosely and lightly, that has ever existed. We have great potential on the other side of it too. We can be really good, and I think where this ties in to our topic for today, now that we're 2 hours in, um, is the whole altruism, the whole idea of altruism, and how that actually exists within Christianity, to what degree, and things like that. And again, being believing that we're all born bad, or we're all born sinners, would probably be the more relatable term to Christian circles. We don't have the ability um, to be perfect, or to not be evil, without the assistance of something that is pure, and 100% good. You know what I
All
mean?
right, so I think I know how you're going to answer my question, but I'm going to ask you my favorite question then, because
Go for
especially
it.
knowing your background in what you just said, because this question, not to hype it up at all, but this is one of my favorite things to ask new people I meet. Um, I'll ask like my sister's boyfriends this question. I'll ask like, just people that I kind of want to get to know. I'll ask them this question because almost no matter what your answer is, I don't care what your answer is. I don't. But I think whatever you answer that, however you answer this, gives me insight into who you are as a person and what your belief system is. But Anthony, do you believe in such a thing as true altruism, or to use a less technical term, being able to perform a completely selfless act of kindness to somebody, help somebody out with no possible like expectation of anything in return?
You want to know something before I answer that? You want to know
Yeah.
something weird? I'm going to read you one of the questions that I wrote down for my
Uh
notes. I kid you not. Does pure altruism exist when it comes to the human heart?
huh. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I believe that we can achieve that in moments in time, but we are not immune to having uh, overarching moments of with selfish
Hmm.
undertones. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whether that be wanting some sort of recognition, um, or reward, because true altruism or pure altruism is it's not self-seeking. It's not it's not there's no expectation of reciprocation with a reward or acknowledgement or recognition or anything like that. um, Me personally, I mean, I believe that anybody has the ability, whether they're a believer or not, to do something nice for somebody else, right?
Hmm.
And or do something good for somebody. But I can't really say, I couldn't identify everybody's true motive or even a sidecar
Hmm.
motive, to why they did that. You know, it's just kind of like you have somebody that agrees to do a news interview because they rescued somebody from a burning
Hmm.
building. Whereas this guy over here, who we don't know and will never know, dropped a wallet with $3,000 in it, um, just because he felt it was the right thing to do. And he just got smart, looked at the license and went to that address, dropped it off, and left and basically vanished without a
Hmm.
trace. Doesn't want any recognition, doesn't want anything, just believed like, hey, that's a lot of money. And that, who knows, that person really, really might need that money for something important, or maybe
Hmm.
not. The truth is, that's somebody else's, and they deserve to have it back, especially if I found it doing the right thing,
Yeah.
right? I believe both of those things are true. I believe that we aren't capable of doing of operating in pure altruism 100% of the time. Does that
It
make
does.
sense?
That definitely makes sense, and it's an interesting answer. I mean, I think that, and I almost want to hold off on giving my answer because I don't want to like sway the conversation one way or another. But like, I think that
Sway away, bro. I mean, we're on a swing set right now, dude. Like, we're going
we're
everywhere.
doing it. So I mean, my answer to that is I actually don't think that it's ever possible, and I don't know that and I don't know that it's kind of for the same reasons that you mentioned, but I think that no matter what, I think that if somebody does something nice for somebody else, guy that dropped off the wallet, person that ran into the building to save the person, I don't think that there's ever not a reward for it, even intrinsically. I think that guy who dropped off the wallet was, may have had another kind of motivation, not necessarily like I want praise or recognition for this, but maybe he felt good about himself afterwards. Maybe he was going through a tough time and needed to prove that he's capable of doing something for himself, and that was something that felt good for him. Maybe he was a religious person and believed that this is, just a good act, and that good acts need to happen in order to, in order to achieve whatever, goal they need to in the religion. Maybe, you know what I mean?
And see, this is where it gets really interesting with the topic of altruism,
Hmm.
because then what is it? Like, what does it look like to be completely 100% selfless in acts of service to other people?
I don't know if it looks like, I don't think that it looks any different than being selfless for a benefit is. I think that staying late to help a struggling colleague understand something so he doesn't lose his job, looks the same as
That sounds oddly familiar, by the
also has
way.
nothing to do with you. I've never stayed late because of you. But I think that it ends up on the surface looking the same as a colleague that stays late to help a struggling colleague because he gets paid time and a half overtime. I think in the end
Mm,
that, like, altruism versus non-altruism looks the same, but I think how people answer that question and what they believe true altruism is and how it's achievable, if it even is, just speaks volumes to who they are as a person.
mhm.
And I think that particularly I'm coming at this from a decidedly non-religious standpoint, and it sounds like you're coming at it from a very
Which I
religious
love, by
standpoint.
the fact.
Yeah, and I love the
The
fact that
no, that's why I love this.
yeah, and I love that you have a very staunchly religious standpoint on it. And I want to know, like, how does that fit? So one of the things I wanted to talk about then is, obviously you say that we are born bad people, in that, we
Mhm.
have, we're born, I'm assuming it's with the original sin, and like that, like,
Yep.
is what makes us inherently bad. So we're born bad people, and that we become good people through good acts. If that's the case, is there such a place for anything like altruism in Christianity, and doesn't even matter? Because if you're doing a good act to score, to score good boy points with a big G upstairs, like, does it does that mean you're not even doing anything selfless? Does that mean you're doing it all to further your own goal?
And that's very interesting because, as Christians, and see, this is people. It's not just with Christianity. Like, if you uh, identify with a certain group, you are forever stained with whatever negative connotation comes along with that, whether you've participated in that game or
Mhm.
not. Right. Um, so, I don't know what kind of interactions you've had with, Christians or
Mhm.
whatever, but Christians can sometimes be the most horrible people that when you compare them to non-religious people, you know what
Uh,
I mean? Like, I've met some pretty gnarly people that have made me go, "Wow!" Like, I can totally see why nobody wants to have anything to do with Christians or Christianity or
mhm.
whatever. And it's kind of like the whole, idea of, one rotten apple spoils the whole bunch. Everything, it bleeds into everybody else. It gives everybody else a bad name. I think a really hot topic, is homosexuality, right? Like, any Christian will tell you, well, nowadays that's not entirely true, but most conservative Christian groups and churches will tell you that homosexuality is a sin. Do I believe that? Yes. Just like I believe watching pornography and doing drugs and killing people and all these other nasty, horrible things that we do, just because we don't participate in that kind of lifestyle doesn't necessarily mean we're off the hook, right? As people, we give different degrees of badness to sins, from a white lie to, God forbid, child molestation or rape or whatever, right? Whatever you want to rate as your top, no. We give it a rating system, but the Bible tells us that no matter what it is, it's all the same to God. A sin is a sin, and basically, sin, you're just missing the mark, right? We're destined to be like this. This is what the original design was. We were supposed to be flying this path here, but we missed it because we did something we weren't supposed to do, or we did something that was unhealthy or not natural or whatever, right? Um, I think the biggest problem that Christians have, at least maybe not so much this generation, but I think in past generations, like my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, there was such there was a lot of like hate, which is completely contradictory to what Christianity is all about, because Jesus is about love, and he is the true definition of love, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, alienating and casting homosexuals, whether you're gay or lesbian or whatever, bi, queer, casting those people aside and essentially dehumanizing them and making them feel worthless is absolutely freaking wrong. Do I agree with that lifestyle? I will tell you 100% no. Do I hate you or think ill of you? No. And they that can coexist, right?
Mhm.
And so I'm not really sure where I was going with that. I
No, I
rabbit trail, but anyways, my point is, I guess, is that Christians can cast a bad light on their whole body as a whole, as a group.
well, and I mean, I definitely
Um,
understand that, and I mean, I think it's any group that anyone happens to associate with, you are then associated with the best parts of that group, and you're also associated with the worst parts of that group. And I think that that's the trouble in identifying as almost anything. Like, if you identify as Democrat or Republican, you are automatically say, okay, I identify as this thing, you're this political leaning. Someone goes, all right, that means you are this terrible thing, but you're also this great thing. And I mean, if we're speaking strictly psychologically, like it takes seven good things to outweigh one bad thing. That's how important, and
right,
that's how like how much premium we put on negative information. And I think that I think that that's any group. I think that it's unfortunate that it's like that for anyone, because I mean, you can be associated with a group but not be the good and bad of that group. You could do nothing but exemplify the good in that group, and still you'll have that negative stigma attached to you.
right, exactly. And that I think that's part of what I was getting at in, you know, you're supposed to love the sinner and hate the sin, right?
Mhm.
Like that's completely viable, right? And if it's our job to, as Christians, to spread the good news, the gospel, right? And anybody that we come into contact with, look, I can't save you.
Mhm.
I can't make you be saved or make you believe in Jesus or any of that. Not only is that not my job, that's not something I actually have the power to do. Really, the only thing that happens as far as what Christians believe is that if you are sincerely asking Jesus to come into your life, right? And you dedicate your life to following him, right? Then then that's something that he does within you through the Holy Spirit, right? I can't make that happen. I can plant the seed and say, you know what, honestly, like I can tell you story after story after story of how God has intervened in my life even when I didn't believe or didn't want to believe and did everything the exact opposite of what he said to do, and what the Bible says to do. um, I can tell you that I absolutely 100% believe that he's real, and he totally changed my life, and in such a definitive way. There's no other way. Like there's no way that I would have been able to do that on my own, because I know myself to a certain
Mhm.
extent, and that the things that happen and the things that were made, and that the circumstances that came into my
Mhm.
circle, right? My bubble, I couldn't have done that on my own, right? And I know that, and I believe that, and I'm totally okay with admitting that. Um, so back to the existence of altruism, right? I think where I wanted to go initially was doing good things. Christians are doing good things because they want to get into heaven,
Right.
right? But that's not how Christians get to heaven, which I think is a big misconception. Like, i- the motivation to do good things is done via the Holy Spirit that lives within you,
S-
right? I could do good things without the Holy Spirit. I think there are certain people that are absolutely against
mm,
God that do lots of nice things, and do it better than some Christians that I've met, which is crazy. That's a whole nother, thought in itself. But um you don't you can do good things with and not have it be, led, and not be led by the Spirit, and not be a Christian and whatever. But I think there's always some motivation, selfish motivation, that you have. And I think, again, that goes back to us being bad from the start, right? And we learn to be good. We don't have a moral code when we're born, right? We have to be taught what's right and what's wrong, right? And we learn more and more and more what that looks like, and define that in depth and in detail as we get older and continue to get older. But there is a hard point where we understand, like, okay, this is bad, this is good, and then we play on rewards. You know what I mean? But that's not what Christianity really is based on. It's not on rewards. If we live a good life and we follow Jesus to the best of our abilities, and we ask forgiveness of our sins, recognizing that we are innately bad, we might not want to be, we might not do bad things all the time, or we might not do that bad of things, but recognizing where we miss the mark or where we sin, and saying, hey, I messed up, I'm really sorry. And we have that repentant heart, which essentially means, like, change your frame of thinking, turn around, go the other direction, like that sort of stuff,
yeah,
right? um if we have a repentant heart and we recognize that, like, hey, these are the statutes or the standards that you have, and we've missed it,
yeah,
right? I decided to follow you, and I messed up. We get forgiveness. Oh, abundantly. It never ends. I could be a sinner to the day that I die in it, but if I'm dedicated, if I believe that Jesus is who he is, the Son of God, that he rose from the dead after he was crucified on the cross for my sins,
yeah,
right? And paid the price. Because in the Bible, the price for sin is
mm,
death, right? So if he paid the price for me, right? And he's offering me eternal life in return for me being dedicated to him and following his standards of life, because if he's the all-seeing, he knows what's best for me more than I know what's best for me, clearly, because I like to snack at like 10:30 at night, and that's not good for me, and I know it, and I do it anyway,
right,
right? So, understanding that, good works, which is in the
mm,
Bible, are inspired, or should be inspired, by the Holy Spirit. Can they be can there still be good works being done if you're not a believer and you don't have the Holy Spirit living inside you? Absolutely. So, do we both have selfish motivations in that? Absolutely. I can't tell you a Christian that I've met that hasn't had a selfish motivation in doing something nice. It might not be a like this big, like, oh, I want to get all this recognition, but you can't tell me that a Christian hasn't had that thought of, well, this might score me some points in
so
heaven.
here's my
You know what I
question then.
mean?
Yeah, and here's my question then, does that cheapen it at all for you? So my viewpoint
Does it cheapen what?
so my viewpoint of a lot of it is that, I already said I don't think that altruism is ever really inherently existent. I think that even altruism in animals, for example, animals show altruistic tendencies, but only when it helps propagate the survival of their pack, their survival of, whoever they're dealing with, right? So it's not
Mhm.
even like, I don't know, it's not even a learned thing. It's something that they have to show a direct benefit for. And if does that cheapen then that good act in your mind? If you see somebody doing something good, like let's say you see, like, we'll go back to my example with the coworker staying late, right? The coworker stays late and he's really helping somebody. Does it make it seem like a less good thing to you and less of a good deed, knowing that that person did it because he's getting time and a half now? Does it cheapen it for you, knowing that that person is helping this person out because, or is doing this seemingly selfless thing because he is getting heaven points or whatever. Like, does that make it seem any less noble at all? Like, whether you want to answer this.
Well, is it a combination of the 2, like helping somebody and getting time and a half, like it's double dipping? Or is it, purely just like, I'm only doing this because I'm getting time and a half?
I don't know if again, I think with my example, I don't know if it matters. I think that looking like me not getting paid past my 8 hours, but still staying after to help you on the surface looks the same as me staying 8 hours and getting paid time and a half every time that I help somebody. I think that those end up looking the same. So, like, let's say that guy that dropped, or we'll use your example of guy that dropped wallet off with $3,000 in it, right? Let's say
Mhm.
we know that his motivation for dropping that off was going to be that he gets, heaven bucks or reward points in heaven. Like, does that cheapen that act for you, knowing that he did it with that motivation, or does it make it, is it just as cool as if he were to do it not expecting anything in return?
That's a good question, and it's kind of tough to answer without diving in, super deep with more
Sure,
specifics.
sure.
But but so doing, let me use your
Yeah.
example really quick for with the guy that stays
Yeah.
after. If he's just doing that to help out and he's not getting anything out of it, let's use that as the benchmark as
Okay.
noble,
Got it.
right? Like he's seriously like concerned with, you know, homeboy, and he wants to, make sure that, he doesn't get fired, and he's just helping a guy out, He knows what it's like to be in that position and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um if it's a combination of the two, yeah, it kind of cheapens it a
Uh
little
huh.
bit, because you're getting something out of it. So, would if that wasn't the case, would you really do it? I think that's the question. If that wasn't the case, would you still do it? Right? If you're just purely motivated because of the time and a half pay, and you're just like, well, I'm gonna do what I can, and there's really no like desire to actually be helpful. Like you might end up helping him and giving him what he needs or helping him along the way, but if that there's no like intention behind that, you're just like, I'm gonna put in the extra time, he gets it or he doesn't, I'm gonna do me, and I'm gonna just give him what I
Hmm.
can. um then that absolutely cheapens it. Like, so asking, well, if that wasn't the case, would you still do it? I think is very important for me to be able to answer either or. But again, like I said, I'm not denying that there's not gray areas, but this would be a prime example of where I'm not totally black or white.
So then,
You know what I mean?
to take this to its literal logical extreme. So you said that knowing that there was a goal in it for him kind of cheapened it a little bit. Does that mean
Uh huh.
that, in again, logical extreme here, does that mean that if somebody who was an atheist did something nice, would that then inherently be more noble than somebody acting from a place of Christian goodwill or Christian faith, because the atheist doing that thing has no benefit to him outside, propagation of the species, or whatever, like, inherently biological thing that you want to attribute to that? Does does that play a factor in it then, if we're going to bring back religion?
So let me
Yeah.
backtrack really quick. So what you're saying is, if we have an atheist who does something completely
Uh-huh.
selfless, there's no benefit, no reward. He does not care about that. He just cares about whatever he's interacting with, that is afforded provision,
Uh-huh.
right? In whatever way or shape
Yeah.
or form. Um, versus somebody who is a believer and does something of the
Mhm.
same, but they obviously get that reward. They go to heaven or they get heaven bucks or however
Yeah.
you want to like, frame that. You're asking which one would the atheist, would I feel that the atheist doing that deed is more noble or less noble than the Christian doing something of the same sort? Is that what you're
Exactly, because if
asking?
we're just talking strictly inherent benefit to the person doing the task, then structurally the atheist would have less to gain from it than the Christian doing the same task. If we're talking about, like, I mean, I used heaven bucks so I could circle back around to this example. Uh, Atheist is awarded no heaven bucks. Uh, Christian is awarded time and a half heaven bucks. So
Right.
does that track too, or is that not even considered? Like, I just wonder where you're at with all that, because for me it doesn't matter. Like, for me it wouldn't matter, the religiosity of the person performing the act, because I think that, I don't believe that altruism's a thing, but I mean, your framework of, it does cheapen it a little bit if somebody is getting money. Or is this not even an argument, because money and things like that are material, and something else, like a heaven buck, for example, isn't a material thing. Like, I can't literally hold
Right.
them up and go to the bank with them.
Um, Again, there would have to be some more specifics for me to ultimately decide, but what you're painting right
Uh-huh.
now, I would say that there's no
Okay.
difference because if we are assigning heaven
Yeah.
bucks, I think the Christian can absolutely do something just like that, especially if they're inspired from the Holy Spirit to do something nice,
Uh-huh.
right? The heaven buck or the time and a half in heaven bucks is a complete sidecar. It's a bonus to what it's
Yeah.
inevitable. If you do something nice, you get a heaven buck regardless, like of what the motivation is, right? That's not necessarily true Christianity. I'm just
Uh-huh.
saying, like, if this guy is like sees a need as a Christian and
Mhm.
acts as Jesus would, which is usually going to always be divinely inspired by the Holy
Mhm.
Spirit, right? Um, then that would be the same thing as the atheist doing it out of the kindness of their own heart, and him not receiving anything. It would be the same to me.
Okay. Okay. I mean, and that's,
You
yeah,
know what I
and
mean?
definitely, and I mean, the thing is, I trust me, none of these questions are traps. Like, I'm not like, haha, my trump card, and then, like, I'm gonna, like, I'm just
Why you gotta bring up Trump? Now we're gonna have to
we're
do a whole
going a
nother
whole another 2.5 hours on this.
podcast. No, yeah, you know what? I mean, honestly, these are great questions. And I don't feel
Good.
trapped at all. And even if I did feel trapped, I really wouldn't care too much because that's the whole point of this podcast, and we've kind of talked about this prior to actually getting to sit down and do this. But the whole point in this podcast is to stretch the brain a little bit, stretch the your thought process and how you think, and allow the platform to be somewhere where disagreements can be
Yeah.
had civilly, respectfully, and new points can be made. I'm not afraid to say I don't know. There's so many things that I have zero clue about, and there's probably a lot of essential things that I should, like, I really honestly learned how to fully wash my hands today. I saw a video with some guy with some black ink and some latex gloves, and I was like, dude, I've been missing spots like my whole life, so there's lots of things that I don't know, and I'm comfortable with that. And there's even things that you know, look, I'm sure I'm not the only Christian. In fact, I know I'm not the only Christian that has questions about their faith, and I think that's actually healthy. I think that um, the Bible and God are two of the deepest um, like chasms of understanding that you could ever come across in this life. Um, and I mean, I learn something new every single Sunday I go to church. Um, and something that, I've read 10 times, like, I mean, how many times has a Christian read the Gospel of John? I could read that time 11 and still be like, oh, I didn't realize that. And it's totally unifying, it's totally linear, matches up with everything. How did I miss that kind of thing? But that's the Bible has so many layers, and reading through it just once or twice, you ain't gonna get to the bottom of it. Like, it is a deep, deep, deep chasm. And I think that's one of the allures to me, is like there's so much to it that I think a lot of people in today's world, they've seen Christians act badly, and that turns them off, and they don't get to experience that. Which you know, I think my a big question is for the atheist that does things out of the goodness of their own heart, um, which kind of goes against what I already had said, but somebody that's doing something that doesn't believe in God, that's doing something just to be a good person or to try to be a good person, doesn't expect anything in return for it. Um, it's just like, dude, why aren't you playing for my team? Like you could be like you could be, such a shining example of what Jesus really looks like in real life and be a representation of that. And like we said, the bad ones, give Jesus a bad name. So it's like nobody really gets to experience Jesus because we're all really horrible at it. We're all really horrible. We're made in his image, but we're horrible at representing him. Like that's such a fascinating, like, concept for me. Like, why can't we get it together? And that can be another podcast maybe we can talk about, because you want to talk about self-loathing and self-deprecation. Like I could probably beat you at it. Like I'm really good at that
Just have a
game.
competition
You
of who
know,
hates themselves the most.
who hates themselves more, right? Like for instance, like I have a really difficult time struggling with you know still being a sinner, which I will absolutely admit to, and deserving salvation that I get offered freely just because I believe Jesus is who he is and died for my sins and rose again and is coming back to take his people home,
Mhm.
you know, which, I mean, this is what makes Christians sound super crazy, is Earth isn't my home. No, I don't believe I'm Alf or ET or whatever, and I'm, or anything like that. I believe that we were destined, we were created to live in, harmony and in unity with God in heaven, and because of the original sin, we kind of got booted out, because that God can not be in the presence of sin. That's just not how that all works. But like I said, I'm asking why isn't the atheist playing for my team? We Christians can give Jesus a horrible name, and it's our fault. It's not Jesus's fault. Like, homosexuals think that Christians hate gays, and stuff like that. And it's just like, no, like, please don't think that that's actually the reality. That's not my truth. Like, that's not, that's not what's happening here, and it's just like failed theology, is so detrimental to how people view Christianity and how people interact with one another,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, I mean, like I said, my notes here, for instance, the contention between
Uh-huh.
altruism or let me rephrase that, the contradiction of altruism and Christianity kind of coexisting, is pretty much comes together in Acts,
Yeah.
right? The book of Acts, chapter 20, verse 34 through 35. And so it breaks down to this. And I think this is where altruism kind of gets related to
Okay.
Christianity. It says it is more blessed to give than to receive,
Mhm.
right? And so if you're really looking at the etymology and of the languages that this was translated from, the word blessed, right, is it expresses divinity, and uh, that's kind of that reward that we're talking about,
Yeah.
right? That heaven
Yeah.
book, it's more blessed to give than to receive, because you get something regardless. Like it feels good to give,
Yeah.
right? And so can that be considered a reward?
I mean, I think yeah.
Like, would I rather, like, I want to give, but I want to feel crappy about it,
See,
right? I want to do something nice for somebody, but I want to feel like
that's
garbage
true
afterwards. I don't want
altruism
to
there.
feel all
That's the
happy.
definition of it.
Right. Exactly. And so, I mean, I guess you could. I guess that's possible. I don't see how it would be be popular, I guess. But I mean, like, I guess you could do something, for somebody, and then just be like, man, I really should have taken that money,
Right.
or something. I don't honestly don't know what that looks like, but coupled with that, like, so that's kind of where I think what seems like altruism is like it's better to do, things for for other people than to get things,
Mhm.
right? But then the counterpoint to that is, if you look at one of the 10 commandments that says love your neighbor as yourself, right? Now that's talking about self,
Mhm.
right? You have to love yourself. Why do you have to love yourself? You have to love yourself and know what that feels like in order to love somebody the same way. Like, you don't love yourself if you're poisoning your body and doing stupid stuff with your body and hurting yourself. That's not love. But if you're taking care of yourself, you're staying healthy, you're eating healthy foods, you're staying away from drugs, and you're staying away from other things that can harm your body, and you actually treat it like a temple, right?
Mhm.
Um, then you're going to be able to recognize that and be able to help somebody else do that. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you. I don't think altruism really does exist. I mean, the if you're talking about the true definition of altruism, which, if we're agreeing that we don't get to redefine, what something like that
Mhm.
is just to fit our position, I don't think it really exists. I think maybe there are shadows of it, but the I don't think it's something that we can do it practically.
Right. When I think ultimately for me, even though I don't think it exists, I don't think it even matters for me. I think that what I just want to see in general is just people helping each other out. And I, in a lot of ways, don't care what the mentality is behind it or what you think that intrinsic reward is. Like, if we're using the example of somebody dropping the $3,000 off, like, all I care about is that person gets their money back. I don't care if, like, the person that dropped it off is going to get some heaven bucks. I don't care if he's going to go home and tell his family and use it as the linchpin for the "I'm a good person" argument when he gets into a fight with someone later. Like, if he blogs about it online to get likes or something, I don't really care what the act or what the reason or the motivation is behind it. I just think that in general, I like the idea of people helping each other out more, and I think that's fine with me.
Yeah, like you can clean up the pearl and get all the clam guts and or the oyster guts off of it and the sand off of it, and you can polish that thing up and take the good out of it, out of a dirty situation, and say, you know what, that's on that
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
right? That has nothing to do with me, but what pleases me and what I think is really cool about this is that this person who needed something, um, somebody else provided for him and stepped up to the plate and helped them out.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's I think what I care about the most. And I mean, and I think that's why I like asking that question is I like to hear what the notion of helping people out like means to somebody. Like, one of the coolest answers I think I've ever gotten to it was I talked to Romana about it last night. And I said, Romana, like, I'm talking to Anthony tomorrow about altruism. And she's like, why? Why is that a discussion? That's just a thing that everyone has. And I'm like, I love that. Like,
Yeah,
that's
that's
that's like
good.
the best answer I've heard. Like, I like that answer better than I like my answer, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, that's that
Yeah, no,
and that's what I like. I like to get at like what people think that means.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, I definitely can say that the conversation about altruism, because it's not something that prior to speaking to you, that I really like considered or thought about. Like, I can, just like anybody else, I can be in my own bubble and, you think I'm holier on Monday than I am on Tuesday and better than this person or whatever. And like, that's a flaw. Like, I'm a very flawed human being. I try my best, but I fail. But before today, I don't think I really gave altruism like too much thought in the fact that, is it real? Does it exist? Is it possible,
Yeah.
or does it not exist? So I don't think I really considered the existence of it too much in depth before our conversation. So this has been not only enlightening but very, very interesting for me to
Yeah, and
consider.
I mean, and I loved hearing your side of it. Where like, I mean, because when I take into consideration what does altruism mean, and is it even existing, and do I when I ask people, like, I have an idea of what somebody with a religious lean would answer it as, but I don't know. You know what I mean? And that's why I like talking about it. I like hearing what those people have to say about it.
Yeah. Well, and not in like again a self-deprecating way speaking about a whole group, but Christians are horrible people too. Like we're just bad. There's no way around it. Like I mean, we can fake and act however you see Christians that you meet act and whatever. You'll come across some super genuine, amazing
Mhm.
people that, from a spiritual perspective, will um, totally help you along that road. And just in the last 2 years, like the connections that we've made at our church, and how that came into how we even started going there in the first place, like totally believe that's God ordained, and like some of the greatest people I've ever met in my life. Um and it's just like true Christians, or Christians that really are dedicated to living a Christ-like life, do exist. They're not any better than the atheist, or the Christian that is a horrible version or whatever. Like we're all on the same plane, dude. Like there's no difference. There's no separation. The only glaring difference is what we
Yeah.
believe. And sometimes we don't even get that right. Like yeah, that might have to be another discussion, because I would love to pick your brain about that.
Oh, I mean, definitely. I'd love to come
And
back for another
those
episode
things.
if you'd have me.
I was going to ask, would you be so kind to come back and do another
Yeah,
episode?
totally, dude.
Cool, cool. Well, before we wrap
Uh-huh.
things up, I do want to say thank
Yeah,
you, because we were like 10 minutes shy of 3 hours. So I really, really appreciate you
no
taking
problem,
time out of your
man.
weekend to sit here and go back and forth. But and I know this is probably, with the life and times that we live in right now, might be kind
Uh-huh.
of hard. But where can people find out more about your improv and stand up comedy and
Phew,
stuff?
that is a good question. If you want to learn more about my improv or my stand up or anything like that, anything that I'm doing comedy wise, the best place to reach out to me is just find me on Instagram. I'm Devon Struthers on Instagram. Instagram or Facebook, really best ways to reach out for me. I make all of my comedy announcements through there whenever I'm doing them. Obviously, that's been kind of on a bit of a hiatus, but that's kind of the main place to reach out and kind of see what I'm up to.
Cool, good deal. All right, and then we'll talk offline
Yeah, man.
more, and set up something else, because this is great for. I don't know if I mentioned this. This is the first podcast for the Common Collective, and this is something that I, at least myself, by myself right now, I'm going to try to bring more content and more value to the human experiment, I guess. um, and if you like us, subscribe. To the podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram as well. But we hope to bring you more of these episodes and have fun. If you like it or hate it, either way, in the comments section, let us know. Other than that, Devin, brother, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure
Yeah, man.
today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Cool, man. All right, we'll do it again soon then.
Definitely.
All right, bye, folks.